The Badlands, what are the Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Mr. Vice President, I'm going off script again, I know, but I just want to personally thank you. We've been through some stuff. We've gone through some of the most complex military operations this country's ever conducted, and your steady hand and your leadership during those was a great source of strength for me. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your character. Thank you for your selfless service. Thank you for commitment. Thank you for being a mentor to me, Mr. Vice President.
It's called the swamp. And you know what happened? And you know what I did? A big favor. I caught the swamp. I caught them all. Let's see what happens. Nobody else could have done that but me. I caught all of this corruption that was going on, and nobody else could have done it. Did I get that one right? Every 4 years, we gather on these steps to carry out the orderly and peaceful transfer of power. Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning, because today we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people. For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government, while the people have borne the cost. Washington flourished, but the people did not share in its wealth. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first.
This is a president of the United States who is a danger to the republic.
America first.
He knows he's an illegitimate president.
The oath of office I take today is an oath of allegiance to all Americans.
The great Trump recovery.
America will never be a socialist country. I will fight for you with every breath in my body.
Russia, Russian, pro-Russian, Russian, Russia, Russian, 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 the Russians. Russian.
Russia, Russia, Russia.
And I will never, ever let you down.
A dangerous virus is spreading rapidly in China, and U.S. officials are very worried that it could come here.
This is really the worst attack we've ever had. This is worse than Pearl Harbor. This is worse than the World Trade Center. There's never been an attack like this.
The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour of action. What they're doing is using COVID to steal an election. Together, we will make America strong again. You know what it's about? Fraud, fake ballots. We will make America wealthy again. They are trying to steal the election.
Now, under the leadership of President Trump, we are fully realizing President Kennedy's prescient view of Special Operations Forces.
We will make America proud again. And watch, please, those mail-in ballots. We will make America safe again. And in millions and millions of ballots, their vote is under what they thought they needed. They're dumping more ballots in there, okay? And yes, together, we will make America great again. Thank you. God bless you. If we are right about the fraud, Joe Biden can't be president.
Congress, the chair declares the joint session dissolved.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Saturday edition of the Devolution Power Hour. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Paul. Chris, how you doing, man?
It's party time, baby.
Party time. Hell yeah. I had a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about. Wanted to talk about some Trump Truth Social posts, but somebody in the chat told me I had to.
Yeah.
Now I can't do it.
Yeah, that's very rebellious, John.
It's just how I operate, guys. Somebody needs to tell me.
Your own program because somebody encouraged you to do it.
Yep. So I need the chat to tell me not to do it, and then once I have enough of those, it'll outweigh it, and then I can do it again.
That's sensible. Yeah,
that's how it works. But yeah, we'll talk about that. The Truth Social posts. We'll talk about some Autopens stuff because there's a pretty cool clip that came out. And then we're probably going to talk a lot about AI and how it's going to kill everybody. So that should be fun.
Yeah.
Should be fun. But before we get to any of that, let's get a quick word from a couple of our sponsors. First up, we got Bear Bars. Pull this on the screen here. Whoops, that's the wrong one. There we go. All right, guys. Have we been duped? We're all trying to get healthier, grabbing protein bars that look healthy. But do you actually know what's in those bars? It's usually junk. One comparison found a fast food burger was healthier than a protein bar. That's why I'm all about this new Bear Bar. That one right here. They are awesome. It's what you thought you were getting in a protein bar. Real food, minimal ingredients, no mystery additives. The Bear Bar is literally beef protein, tallow, honey, and salt. And that's it. All real food. It's unbelievable, and it tastes amazing. More reason to love it is it's 20 grams of clean grass-fed beef protein. It doesn't taste like beef, though. It's light, fluffy texture, not a gut bomb like other protein bars. It's naturally sweet, easy on your stomach, and most importantly, tastes amazing. Like I said, Bear Bar got it right. A high-quality protein bar without the junk. You guys got to try it. You can get a 15% discount and free shipping. Use promo code DPH at getbearbars.com. That's getbearbars.com. Promo code DPH. All right, we'll get to our next sponsor here in a minute. And shout out to Micro Toolmaker. Looks like he's kicked off the show before we even started with a $77 rant. Appreciate you. I saw he gifted some subscriptions as well. It says another great day for DPH. Where we go one, we go all. Thank you. But all right, man, let's talk about that Truth Social post.
Yeah.
This is pretty funny.
Yeah, let's see it, I guess.
So Trump reposted somebody. So on his timeline, it looks like this. Hold on. Yeah, right there. But when you click on it, what it says there is no Joe Biden. He was executed in 2020. Biden clones, doubles, and robotic engineered soulless, mindless entities are what you see. Democrats don't know the difference. I should probably read through every single one of these hashtags, huh? Steel, U.S. Steel, Mega.
You don't have it on the TV on the screen.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah, there you go.
How about you read through all the hashtags? I read my part.
Well, I see at Black women there and at Moms for America.
Nice.
So,
off to a good start.
I feel like everybody was tagged.
I don't see Black Moms for America, though.
That's a good point. Well, Black women for Trump. Black
Hispanics against socialism. I like that crew.
Yeah. I wonder what the common thread between all these people he chose were, or she, I guess, like maybe some woman posted this. This doesn't seem like something a woman would do.
He doesn't seem like a cry for attention or something. No, but it is interesting that Trump reposted it. I can't begin to wonder why he would repost something like that. Feels like one of those sitting on the toilet Truth Social post moments. Because I personally, I don't care how many times Trump tweets it. I personally do not believe that Joe Biden has been executed. I do not believe we've seen clones. I know body doubles exist and are used in situations, but I think it was the real Joe Biden. And I think there's a lot of AI green screen stuff involved. But Trump posting that, I'm sure, is not going to help my case. So
it's definitely not going to help your case insofar as people yelling at you when you say what you just said. But I guess we can think of
earlobes.
Yeah. Well, I have seen his earlobes. His earlobes are weird. His eyes are weird. His entire face is a different face than a face he used to have. And, you know, Anna Paulina Luna's face from yesterday looks different than it did 3 weeks ago. And I'm sorry that I used her real name. Una Panuna came out with, I guess her fillers have been dissolved or something. That's what I'm told the excuse is.
How about I play that video while you find that image you're talking about?
All right.
This is a great comment in the chat here from Faith and Freedom on the topic reminder of Joe Biden having been executed and is actually a clone and a robot and a body double. She says, or he says, John going to continue to do gymnastics to avoid facing the truth.
I mean, well,
what I'm doing.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know the answers to these things. So, you know, I think that I think that maybe the approach is to just talk through what the possibilities are.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can see if those possibilities are likely or improbable.
I like that.
And we'll keep our minds open and have a range of possibilities. But by the way, this is Una Panuna now. That's a different woman. I mean, it could be her with
just no makeup or something.
I don't know, man. It looks a lot different. Not the weird, like injected lips and stuff.
Huh.
I don't know.
Is the injected lip stuff not permanent?
I think you can have, I was consulting about this because I was trying to figure out somebody in my chat was like, the fillers are dissolved. And so I said, well, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
And apparently that's a thing. And it's not.
So it goes away.
Well, sort of, or it just goes somewhere else inside your skin and then resides there. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, she looks a lot different.
She does. She definitely does. Okay, but let's game theory this a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Joe Biden and the possibilities here. So number one.
Well, maybe first we should talk about what Trump's doing with these posts, right? Because it's like everybody just assumes that Trump is like verifying when he reposts these things. He's like giving a hat tip and a nod to whatever it is he's reposting. And he's saying, this thing right here is true. I don't take that from his posts. You know,
I don't either.
And I'm not saying that it's a mistake necessarily. I'm saying that he's putting a different idea out there and people are going to talk about it. We're talking about it right now. There's probably already articles springing up about Trump's cryptic post says Joe Biden is dead and gone, you know, and we're going to have just a spate of those for the next 24 hours. People are going to analyze it. Some people are going to write think pieces, and we will still not know what Trump did and meant. Today's also, I think, the anniversary of Covfefe, right?
It is.
So
Dan Scavino put a post out about that.
Yeah. Another totally cryptic post, you know, unless you're G Money, and I think he's onto something. But so that's one of the possibilities, right? Yep. It's just something that he's reposted to start a conversation. And yeah, it's a good and enjoyable meme. But you know, Trump has reposted countless posts that are like bad memes and cue phrases and all that. He'll just take these posts that clog up his reply fields on Truth Social and just blast them out to everyone, and then like let the media pick up the pieces and try to figure out what's going on. And it's kind of funny. I mean, but I don't take from that he's like saying, yes, look at this in every instance. So I don't know.
Well, okay. So let's start with this. Mm-hmm. Do you think every time Trump posts something, he does it with like an intention of like, just, I want to spark the conversation? Or is it possible he just like is going through Truth Social like a normal human being would and like just retweeting stuff that he thinks is awesome? I mean, this guy gets tagged in 1 million posts a day on Truth Social, yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, so I tend to lean towards he's typically up to something most of the time, mm-hmm. if not all the time, like constantly, either whether he's checking feedback loops or what. So if we're going to go under the assumption that he was up to something with this, he was doing it for a purpose. What is that purpose? Let's examine the actual Truth Social post a little bit more and go through like what it actually means if what Trump is reposting here is true. Okay. And I want to start with the Joe Biden being executed thing, because that's a biggie. He is saying that Joe Biden was executed in 2020, which means, I mean, shit, Trump was president in 2020. So at some point, Trump took the guy running against him as president and had him executed. Like, is that what we're going with?
Well, I mean, that's not something that I generally think what happened, but could I lay out a scenario where that would make sense? Yeah, I think so. You
Let
know,
me hear it.
Joe Biden didn't make any sense as a real presidential candidate to win a real election. And of course, he wasn't a real presidential candidate who won a real election.
Yeah.
He won a fake election. We were told he won a fake election that he clearly didn't win.
100%.
Then a certification was pushed through, and he was the star of a fake inauguration that was shown on television. And then he proceeded to pretend to be president in certain situations for the next 4 years. And those situations were few and far between. He wasn't actually president. He wasn't really shown to us as president. He wasn't really in control of anything. And there's no reason to believe that he ever knew what was going on. So, I mean, I got to take all those things into account and then think, were Joe Biden's crimes totally proven by 2020? Of course they were. The Hunter Biden laptop was in the possession of the FBI for, I think it like April 2019 or maybe August 2019, if I'm not mistaken. But it was well before, a year before the election, at least, months before the Ukraine impeachment hoax, where the evidence on the laptop would have immediately exonerated Trump. So, you know, there's certainly a justification for why he could have been executed, to the extent that that's actually Joe Biden and that those political crimes are real. Then he would have committed treason. And then you could imagine a consequence like that. We're already watching a total fabrication of just about everything. So to add on a layer that like Joe Biden was fake, already being able to point out a bunch of ways that Joe Biden was fake, I mean, it's not the furthest stretch.
No, I mean, and well, the clones part to me is a little bit the body double stuff, like them being willing to put somebody in a mask. Like, I know that technology exists. I know it's possible. I still do believe it was actual Joe Biden. He's had a facelift. He's got mental issues. That's who they put out there. Because also, why would you need the Autopen if it wasn't the real Joe Biden? You know what I mean? Like that story kind of goes hand in hand with this. If it's a pretend Joe Biden, you could have him sign shit and not have other people do it behind the scenes. I mean, I know you could do both at the same time too, but it's them executing him in 2020. That's the part where I'm coming. Like I'm gonna have to overcome some mental hurdles with that one, because if they had enough evidence on this guy to execute him back in 2020, that means 5 years have gone by and we have not seen that evidence. And they have not told us about what they did to him. And so what does that tell us about the people who not only executed him, but are in control of that information and in power right now?
Yeah.
That's not people I want ruling me. Those aren't the good guys if they're doing that behind closed doors in secret.
Yeah. I mean, that in particular is a very weird situation and dynamic that you're describing. And I agree with you that all of this stuff should be transparent to the public. But if it was transparent to the public, perhaps we wouldn't have been able to get through this period in the same way. I would also just say, like, I don't think that we have to form a belief around this, right? Like, we can keep our minds open to these possibilities that sound crazy to us, but as long as they're plausible and could represent a reality that we might confront one day, we should at least be open to the fact that we are not fully understanding the situation. That being said, as far as the Autopen thing goes, we've talked about this a number of times, but I'm pretty firmly in the position now where I think that there was some level of control by the administrative state that remained under Biden, and Biden was just an avatar of what that administrative state was doing.
Yeah.
They were allowed to assume their positions and control whatever they could control. But the Biden thing in the role of president was just kind of walled off from all of that. had no impact on the administrative state. The administrative state had no impact on him. They had the ability to sign these things. They would just send them to the news and publish them as having been signed. And the truth is that we don't ever ask for verification of anything as long as mainstream media on both sides of the uniparty divide are agreeing that that's the thing that happened. I was thinking about this earlier today in writing about the controlled opposition dynamic. We have this weird, like, intellectual or mental shortcut that we take, thinking that if you take the uniparty right story and the uniparty left story, the real answer is somewhere like around the average middle between those two extremes. But those are a controlled opposition dynamic that ultimately lead to the same conclusions about what reality is. And the answer's not between them at all. And so, man, I see that pattern again and again and again. And I think it's a very natural pattern to assume when you first reject both parties and say, okay, I know Democrats are corrupt. I know Republicans are corrupt. The answer must be somewhere in the middle. And that's usually just not true.
Can you maybe give an example of what you mean by like a story where you reject both sides, assuming the answer's in the middle, but it never was in the middle, it's something else?
I could certainly come up with one of those. Okay, so if you talk about Russia, Ukraine, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are the people who are putting Ukraine flags on the outsides of their houses. And then there are the people saying that Russia's not even invading, like that Ukraine should not be funded, that this isn't our war, whatever it is. Maybe the answer is outside of that, and that things aren't happening the way we're being told in the first place, right? Yeah. Like when you are in the controlled opposition dynamic, you're going to assume that the underlying story is true and that you're getting points of view that represent what are laid out as opposite positions, but are really in many ways the same position and just different justifications, one justifying one side, one justifying the other side. I don't know if that was the best example, but I can think of some more.
No, I think that's a good example. I mean, the objective from both sides is to keep us away from the actual truth. And right. So they don't care where you settle as long as it's not on the truth, and they'll just oppose each other. But let's bring it back to this Joe Biden thing. I mean, with the Autopen and that, maybe we should play the clip. I got that clip here. Let's start doing this, and keep in mind that Trump just said Joe Biden was a clone. He didn't say it. He retruthed somebody who said Joe Biden's dead and is a clone.
Work here are in talks with Republicans in Congress to go and testify about what they did or didn't do to possibly conceal President Biden's decline. Do you think that Dr. Jill Biden should also have to come in and testify about what she did or didn't do?
Well, I hate the concept of it. It's the wife of a man who was going through a lot of problems, and everybody that dealt with him understood that. And I guess it came out during the debate loud and clear. That was the biggest signal of all. They have to do what's right. The country was there was a lot of dishonesty in the election, as you know, of 2020. That's been now caught. People understand it was a rigged election. And when you go further out, when you see the Autopen, I mean, I think the Autopen is going to become one of the great scandals of all time, because you have somebody operating it or a number of people operating. Because I knew Joe Biden. Joe Biden wasn't in favor of opening up borders, letting 21 million people into this from prisons and mental institutions and gang members. He wasn't into that at all. And you know, who signed these orders, proclamations, and all of the different things that he signed that set our country so far back, that was so bad for our country.
Okay, well, let's start with this part. You know, obviously opens with the Jill Biden. What do you think about her testifying? He says he's against it, and then he gets into Joe Biden wasn't in favor of any of these things that they did, even though he kind of campaigned on it a little bit. So Joe Biden, the guy we saw, at least made it seem like he was kind of into those things. But yeah, so far, interesting. And then it gets even more interesting the second half. But is there anything you want to add to this so far?
No, let's keep going.
Okay.
Autopen, how would it work? Like, we're in the Oval Office right now. If there was a group of rogue staffers that worked for you who wanted to advance a bill or an executive order without your knowledge, how could they do it? How do they know?
Well, it's very hard because I'd read your newspapers or your media the next day and I'd say, well, I didn't approve that, and I would find it. I mean, they wouldn't get away with it for long because I'd say, I never signed that. Who the hell signed that? Autopens, to me, are used to sign letters to people because we get, I think they said 20,000 letters a week. And you like to be able, when somebody takes the time to write a letter, it's nice to sort of write back. And autopens are meant for that. Autopens are not meant to sign major proclamations or tax cuts or borders, anything having to do with the border, which is so important. And if it happened on my watch, I would be able to see it because the next day or sooner I'd be reading about something that I knew nothing about and who the hell signed this. So I almost never use the autopen. In fact, yesterday I was signing about 81, I think it was 81 proclamations and statements to people that I think should be signed by us. I think when you write letters to foreign dignitaries or presidents or prime ministers, you should be signing those letters, not done with autopens. I understand he signed almost everything with an autopen. It's a very dangerous thing. It really means you're not president. Whoever operated the autopen, and we think we know who that is, and it was actually more than one person, but that's not what the presidency is all about.
Well, one thing I want to add to the first part with him saying Joe Biden is really against those things. It does kind of put him in an interesting position if they choose to respond. Like if anybody were to ask Joe Biden, like, hey, Trump says you actually weren't in favor of these things. He's going to have to either respond by saying, no, that's not true. I am in favor of those things, further doubling down like how the Democratic Party is retarded. Or he's going to have to say, you're right, I am not in favor of those things. Somebody must have signed those for me. Like it kind of does put him in a little narrative pickle. But anyway, why don't you go ahead and comment on whatever.
Well, I certainly do like that part. But I'm also the part that I thought was the most interesting. I mean, aside from obviously him declaring once again that there's obviously no way that Joe Biden won.
Yeah.
Peter Doocy was asking him, like, how would it be possible for this sort of scenario to happen? And what Trump described is a scenario that would be like the bare minimum bar to cross as president in terms of fiduciary duty to the people, to your job, to your position, et cetera. Joe Biden didn't do any of those things. He obviously didn't know that any of this stuff was happening. He would be like cordoned off from the media so that no one was asking Joe Biden what was going on. Trump said very clearly, like he would obviously know about any of this stuff the next day. He's putting himself in contrast to Joe Biden, who clearly didn't. I mean, all of this stuff is a bit mysterious on some level. I don't know, from a devolution perspective, it could make sense that these things were being put in place well outside of Joe Biden's control. Some of the executive orders, like the extension of 13848, for instance, the change on, what was it, 13961, the night before Joe Biden, quote unquote, left office. Those are at least possible instances of, I mean, proofs that something else was going on there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of interesting things that we could touch on here, and I want to show you two of them. Let's start with this clip. And I also want to say it is interesting when you consider what Trump is saying here. Like, I would find out the next day because of the media. Like, Trump is finding out what's going on in terms of government executive orders from the media. Like, that's kind of silly too. You know, like we all figure it out from the media.
Right. But the question was framed like, is there any way this could ever slip past you? And he's like, well, no, because I would see it the next day in the media, and I would know that someone's done something beyond my control. So I don't know. I don't bump up against that the same way.
Okay. This is a throwback clip. I think it's kind of proof of the story that Biden didn't know what he was doing.
Real quickly, Mr. President, can I ask you a question? I cannot answer this from my constituents in Louisiana. Sir, why did you pause LNG exports to Europe? Like, I don't understand, you know, liquefied natural gas is in great demand by our allies. Why would you do that? Because you understand, we just talked about Ukraine. You understand you're fueling Vladimir Putin's war machine because they got to get their gas from him, you know. And he looks at me stunned with this, and he said, I didn't do that. And I said, Mr. President, yes, you did. It was an executive order, like, you know, 3 weeks ago. And he goes, no, I didn't do that. And he's arguing with me. I said, Mr. President, respectfully, could I go out here and ask your secretary to print it out? We'll read it together. You definitely did that. Real quick.
I think that's a perfect example of, if the story is true, that Joe Biden literally didn't know what he was signing. And then the second clip that I find very interesting in terms of Devo related, like this story, the Autopens story, and who was really running the government, which Trump keeps asking. It's this one, when he was asked the same question on Glenn Beck.
Who's actually the president, Mr. President?
Well, I think it's a committee of people, and they might not even know who the committee is. They may not even know themselves. Does that make sense? It's a group of people that are in different levels of D.C., and they surround a man that was not the most capable person. By the way, never was.
Right.
But certainly not anymore.
Yeah.
And she's worse than he is. She's worse than he is. And the difference is she was a believer. You know, she was a believer for a long time. She was a Marxist
right.
for a long time. She's further left than Bernie. You've heard that many times.
Yeah.
You talk about it. But she's further left than Pocahontas, okay? Pocahontas is probably further left than Bernie, I think. I don't know how you rate him. I'd have to go by your scale. I believe in your scale maybe more than mine. You know better. But if you think about it, you know, we have some people, and she is considered the most left in the entire Senate, and not the smartest.
I thought he would weave back to the question, but he didn't in that clip. But you get the answer at the beginning. He's talking about a committee. It sounds very much like the story we're being told about the Autopen right now. Fits that. Mm-hmm. Also, when he said this at the time, very much so fits the Federal Mission Resilience Committee that we talk about from Devolution Part 13. And you know what? Maybe there's a mix of the two involved here. We don't know the full details, but the Autopen story is not going away. And I would say it only got more interesting with this Truth Social post, which is maybe why Trump posted it. I don't know.
Could be. One of the other things is that the executive orders and these other laws that would have been signed by the Autopen, it really only has a real world effect to the extent that there are other entities out there that will then be carrying out the orders as written, right? And so what entities would be doing that? Well, it's possible that funding could be directed to the states, and then states would do with that funding what Congress desired. So that's one of the ways that could happen. It's possible they would put laws in place, and then courts would decide on the basis of those laws that were put in place. So you end up starting to build out and flesh out what the effects of those moves could have been in the real world and who would have been carrying out those effects. And I would again suggest that there are levels of the infiltration within the government and within the court system. And we understand that they have all the help they need from corporations and academia and the political parties and these other parts of the old guard of the regime, you know? So all of that is aligned with the regime agenda, and whoever was controlling Joe Biden, assuming that it's not from the Trump side, assuming that it's just like the Obama people, you know, some of the advisors, Ron Klain and Steve Ricchetti and these other people that are talked about, Susan Rice, et cetera, around Biden, assuming it was them running him, then if the decisions only affect other entities they also control, then the legality of the executive orders is totally irrelevant, right? The only real world, real power effect that laws and executive orders can have is that people will respond to them in accordance, and that people who don't will then be prosecuted or otherwise punished. And if there's nobody getting punished for not going along, and everybody who might go along is already on board with the program, and so will go along, then you have a government continuing to churn as it always was before without any need for legal legitimacy behind it. And I think that that's actually what we watched for 4 years. And I think the same thing is true of the Congress. Like, as soon as people recognize that these things are entirely illegitimate and they stop complying and stop, even in spirit, handing over the power to these people that they're actually legitimate representatives of us, the whole thing in some sense kind of drops away.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, because I do okay, if let's game theory that out too. Everything you just said is brilliant, and you're absolutely right. We did go through that the last 4 years. And now if you're Trump and we're still seeing the same thing with elections still being fake, Congress being illegitimate, and the judiciary branch completely overstepping their role, like everything's just fucked right now. How would you get people to the point where they just need to kind of stop complying? Like, can you think of any other way to do that other than like going full speed ahead and kind of doing the same thing that they were doing the previous 4 years, like just making life shitty, essentially?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think that life has to be made shitty. And I think that if we try to separate 2021 through 2024, like each one of those years, life was made substantially less shitty as time went on, right? So whatever the Biden effect was at the beginning, all the jarring shit the regime tried to do in terms of prosecuting people, singling out people as domestic terrorists, putting in the vaccine mandates and the rest of it, like that stuff kind of tapered off after a certain amount of time. And all of those things have come around to backfire. Everything that fake administration has done has actually made their project look worse, which by itself couldn't happen unless they were either just hated by everybody, which is totally possible, or they were controlled by the enemy the entire time, which is also, I think, possible, and maybe less likely. I don't know, but certainly possible, I think.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking of what you said there, and then the AI stuff we're going to talk about and some of the direction that might be going and how those two things could kind of be working in parallel. Also, Stephen Miller did an interview with Laura Trump tonight, and he was talking numbers. And I think him being in the Trump administration, his numbers for like where people are at on things is probably a little more accurate than us speculating. He said something that was like 10 to 20% of people actually believe in the Democrat agenda and the ideology, which, if anything, is probably high. But that's a fair assessment. And considering that, like, he was talking about why they have to commit fraud and steal elections and do all these things and go outside the judiciary. It's a really good interview. I encourage you guys to check that out. I did ask Grok, okay, because I know I'm getting some pushback in the chat for not believing that Joe Biden was executed. And I know Trump said, look at him, he's shot, which there's a double meaning for that. Double meanings exist. And Grok said, and I'm pushing on the point of, can somebody be executed in secret? Because I'm not okay with that kind of system. And it says, no, executing someone in treason or for treason in secret is highly unlikely in most modern legal systems. Here's why: legal protections. It's explicitly defined in the Constitution. Convictions require a high standard of evidence. And the trials for treason are public to ensure accountability and fairness, which, like, I feel like that would be a big part of it. Is you'd want that whole trial to be public and happening live, like to get the most eyeballs on it, to show the proof of what they did.
Yeah. I would suggest that as far as the legal concerns that Grok has mentioned there, you know, if it is to that level and the court system is corrupt, as we know it to be, right? It's been totally flooded. And maybe that's what his Federalist Society post was pointing out the other day, that it's been flooded by both sides, perhaps. But if that's the case, then maybe you have to take it somewhere else. You know, people talk about military tribunals and the rest of it, and we haven't gotten any kind of confirmation of that as far as I know, but it still seems like it's at least somewhat possible. And so that, I think that framework could make sense as far as the legal side of it goes.
Okay, but what about just like from a moral standpoint, if this is who we're backing in Trump, right? And like, it's, well, one, it's not, you can't call yourself the most transparent administration in history if you have executed your opposition leader or the guy they said was the opposition leader and didn't tell anybody about it, that's not very transparent. But just from a moral standpoint, like, even though I don't like Joe Biden and don't agree with anything he did, and I think he did commit treason, and I think if he was put on trial for the crimes that we believe he did, and the evidence was there that he probably could be executed for treason, for sure, I wholeheartedly do not agree with that process playing out behind closed doors without anybody knowing, and yet still putting us through what we went through these last 4 years and what we're going through now. It's the forever psyops, and it's being justified for whatever reason they're justifying it for, but they're still lying to us in a very, very big way, which I am 100% not okay with.
I'm in total agreement with you about everything you just said. I would also say that in terms of, you mentioned it actually in your remarks before, but is it possible to go through this without a trial, without the public seeing it? I would suggest that the last 4 years have been a publicly televised trial. I mean, when I watch cable news at this point, it seems like the newscasters are asking these questions as though they're defense attorneys, and people like Andrew Weissman and Andrew McCabe. Is it Andrew Weissman? Did I just mess that up? And Norm Eisen and all these other guys. Like when they're on TV talking, it sounds like their defense attorney is asking them questions. Well, what is it that happened? And then they'll answer from their perspective with the most like defensive interpretation possible, the most biased viewpoint possible, just totally obscuring facts that people believe are definitely true after a great deal of research on all of these characters. And so it sounds like they're defending their innocence on television all the time. And the people have had a chance. The jury of the public the court of public opinion has had a chance to judge these people now consistently for the last, some of them for a decade. And it seems like we're coming to some consensus about guilt or innocence on these things. I don't know, man. Maybe that's too like, it's not metaphorical, but poetic. I don't know. Maybe that's like going a little too far in terms of what the meaning is of a public legal defense, but I think you can view it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. A lot of what we saw these last 4 years, I mean, it is kind of this public disclosure of a lot of wrongdoings that were going on. And just like reading the chat and some of the comments out here, there's a couple that were sticking out. Hold for processing. Johnny made the perfect argument for Trump never walked away in 2020. I agree. I want transparency, but things are not usual and haven't been for several years. I understand that, but that still doesn't justify executions, in my opinion, like this. What's better, 5G warfare or kinetic civil war? Like if you've reached the threshold to prove somebody's guilty for treason to the point of them like going to be executed, that means you have like some pretty damning evidence. Why can't the rest of us see it? And then like we would support the execution, right? Like, wouldn't we?
Well,
like, why can't you show that to everybody?
But what if it actually was shown to all of us? Because we did see it back then, right? I mean, we had the Hunter Biden laptop in 2020.
Sure.
Right. So, Marco Polo, Garrett Ziegler and his team have compiled a list of, I can't remember. I mean, it's like a 540 page long dossier. I think that there's 100 plus violations of the criminal code listed in there, proven by the evidence on the laptop. And among those things are payoffs from leaders of our foreign adversaries and dealings with energy companies in Ukraine, and Hunter Biden texting with his brother's wife, who he was having an affair with, about the fact that people believe he was responsible for children being burned alive in the Donbass. Like, that stuff's been out there in public for 4 years, and we're just not at the point where the public consensus agrees that it's true. But that's because the TV hasn't told them that it's true. In fact, the TV told them, ignore all that stuff. That's just that's all sketchy information. You can't think of that as fact. And a lot of people still operate on that basis at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I've read through probably 80% of those emails for a while there. I was like digging super hard trying to find some
Right, I
stuff.
remember that. Yeah.
The thought process though, that like I'm seeing come up time and time again, like, because like people trying to justify why it had to be done in secret and why this is what happened. Like, why would Trump say anything about it then now? Like, why would Trump repost this Truth Social post based on every single reason you guys are giving for this having actually taken place? You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's you're talking about them doing this all in secret, but now that secret is out based on a retruth. That's a contradiction.
I'm going to just take a second and look at this account because I wonder what the other posts are like. I mean, it looks like, to be honest, just relentless garbage. And so what is Trump reposting ultimately? And whose account is this? You know, I Truth Social is unfortunately just beset with masses of bots. And if you go into any Donald Trump Truth Social post and then begin scrolling through the replies, you see all of those awful memes, the sort of memes that he regularly reposts, and they're all supportive of Trump or supportive of Q or very based and red-pilled Republican content. But it's all worthless internet content that makes it impossible to see how people are reacting to Donald Trump's posts on Truth Social. And that's really unfortunate because it would be better for probably everybody if the replies underneath the Trump post were the real American people talking about what Trump was doing, right? Instead of that, we have all these awful memes that then occasionally Trump will go through and repost 40 of them in a row. And yeah, there you go. Stuff like that. I mean, you know, it's not like I'm complaining about that meme. If someone sent it to me, I'd be like, yeah, cool, whatever. But that's garbage content. Like, this person's not thinking of what to post and then posting it. They're
just trying to get attention.
Yeah. And so when you think about the bot armies, though, somebody's directing them. And who are the people directing them? Does Trump know something about the people directing them? And is he kind of just throwing it in their faces when he reposts something ridiculous like this? I don't know, man. I go through possibilities trying to think of what all this could possibly be. But yeah, I mean, you just saw that post. So
yeah. And I think back to like what Trump just did a couple weeks ago. I think we talked about this on last Saturday's show. On Friday night, he posted something along the lines of, how dare the Supreme Court do this? They're the worst people ever. They're destroying our country by allowing all this stuff to take place. And then the very next day, like within 8 hours of posts, he's like, hopefully the Supreme Court will save us. We need the Supreme Court to save us. Yeah. Something that he knows he does not need. Mm-hmm. He knows, like, he's literally posting something that is not true. And so what does that mean when it comes to these retruths? I see him as like, we were kind of having this discussion a little bit through text, but it was in terms of Bitcoin and some like the big names coming to the Bitcoin conference. And the term I said was manufacturing consensus. That's why they're drawing all these big names in. And that's what the Psy war is. Like, it's everybody everywhere trying to manufacture consensus around whatever the thing they want to happen is. Like, that's what it is. Trump, not only is he manufacturing consensus, but he's doing these feedback loops. And I think it was Cliff High who's the first one to at least brought it to my attention or phrased it this way. And we've been talking about it ever since. And this is way back in the first interview I ever did with him. But he's talking about the self-organizing collective and how Trump, and like when he's giving his campaign speeches and talking about the COVID vaccine, he's doing that because he wants to see what the reaction is and how people respond to that thing. And then he'll know whether we're ready to move on to the next disclosure or if we need to stay in this feedback loop for a while. And that's almost what he did. He would talk about the COVID vaccine all the time. And then it kind of came to a point where it just really stopped happening. He never really talked about it again because we had moved on. It only gets brought up if somebody asks him a question about it. And maybe that's what he's doing with a post like or a retruth like this, because he knows that people are gonna focus in on this and be like, holy shit, Trump just reposted that Joe Biden was executed in 2020. And so whatever the reason is, that's where it's got to be some sort of like, let's check the temperature on the, like, is everybody thinking that Joe Biden was a clone? Is that where we're at, or what? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think that we're still on a really interesting timeline right now. And Monday is when the Lindell trial starts, and we'll see how that goes. But that could lead to disclosure about the elections. And, you know, you have the Autopen thing. People are beginning to wrestle with the idea that Joe Biden's presidency was totally illegitimate and that all of it can be overturned. So to then hear after that, once you've started accepting it, that he actually did steal that election, that everyone watched him steal, maybe at that point something changes. But about the manufacturing of consensus, man, that's like one of my biggest concerns. When I can sense that that the consensus is being manufactured rather than forming around the truth, that's very disconcerting.
Yeah.
And I think that that's another good example of what we were talking about before. You know, within the manufacturing of consensus, within that part of the info war, you've got consensus being manufactured on one side, the opposite consensus being manufactured on the other side. Which of these sides is going to win? Well, neither of them have to represent the truth. The truth might be totally outside of that, and the consensus should be forming over there, but it's not forming over there because we still want to battle within the binary, because we want the red team to win rather than the blue team. And I would suggest that every time we get stuck in that, we are missing what is really happening.
Yeah. And honestly, okay, maybe I shouldn't even say it, but I was going to bring this up to like the Q drops and stuff, like how so many people are focused on what certain people are saying who are building consensus for something that may not be the truth. And they're tying it back to that. Like you're stuck in that feedback of the manufacturing of consensus. But you said something there about the election theft in the Mike Lindell case that's starting Monday. I mean, it's very possible that we get our election fraud disclosure from that case, but it is really difficult for me to imagine a scenario where Trump walked away from a stolen election, having the evidence and everything, and he was going to rely on a Mike Lindell, Eric Coomer lawsuit to get that out to the public. Like, I feel like there's got to be another way. Well,
yeah, maybe. Or maybe Mike Lindell was able to go out because he was spending for ad buys on all of these, you know, quote unquote, conservative networks. And he was just able to be a megaphone for 4 straight years. He's always positive. He's always upbeat. He's always confident that they're going to win. He went to the White House right before, during I think it was January 9th, if memory serves. There's a lot there. And the fact that this trial is happening like 2 weeks before the 250th birthday party begins, that's real interesting as far as I'm concerned, man. The timing there is bananas. I mean, I'm one of the people who has thought that he's had it the entire time. And I know that, you know, many members of Badlands don't agree with that, but
Mike Lindell?
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote an article about this. My third addendum was about Mike Lindell and John Durham. And what if it was possible they were non-commissioned officers to the military, and like, that's how he was allowed to have that information. But I think you were right. It was January 15th. He was at the White House, and this was that sheet of paper that had Kash Patel as CI director. Kurt Olson's on here. Oh, who's that? There's another big name that shows up in this. Can't remember which one. Oh, yeah, but that was such an interesting time. And I mean, it's possible. Okay, it's possible we get our election fraud disclosure from the Lindell case. I feel like they might have a redundancy. I hope they have a redundancy to put that out.
All that needs to happen in the Lindell case is that it causes the entire country to talk about our elections being rigged and stolen. He doesn't need a win. The win comes in the public understanding as the evidence is presented, to the extent it's going to be. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in this case, but just getting people talking about that again. I mean, the amount of people who have not looked into the 2020 election still seems to be most people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people aren't coming up to me and getting in touch with me and saying, hey man, I thought that the elections being stolen a few years ago was absolutely crazy, but now I'm really thinking maybe that's possible. Haven't seen that, right? They haven't looked back at it. It's something that they got wrong, so they just want to forget it. And that the truth is that all of Con Inc., all the GOP establishment, they want to forget it as well. They want to move on with the election system as it exists. All the power centers of the GOP establishment, including places like Turning Point USA, are still committed to the old election system and talking about elections that way, because that's where the power base is. That's where the money comes from. So a lot of people have had no reason to go back and look at it. So to bring that back around, I think could potentially be really effective.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, I understand the argument you're making is a good argument. And, you know, outside of our bubble, I don't think people care about elections as much as we like. They're very apathetic. And it's the info war in reality is like it's who can move the apathetic further to their side than the other side. You know what I mean? Because back in 2020, it wasn't that people didn't recognize the election was stolen, in my opinion. I think a lot of people were like, yeah, that's kind of weird. All these things that happened. Trump's probably right, but I don't really care. I was told he was mean on Twitter, and they're telling me Biden's really good at foreign policy and shit. So maybe this is a good thing. I don't care. That's what I feel like the mindset is, where maybe after 4 years of Biden, and if they had stolen the election from Trump again, it would have been a lot more people kind of into the bubble, like, yes, this is not okay. But by allowing Trump to win, they kept the people in the apathetic zone. And so it's a matter of not losing that. But I feel like in order to go back and correct 2020, we need disclosure in a pretty big way that's going to upset some people in a big way to actually get the reform needed. Otherwise, I don't think people care enough.
They might not care because it's not in their faces. But as soon as it becomes publicly acknowledged that our elections are screwed, all of those people will move to that position immediately, because holding on to their own position, their old position, will become embarrassing, right? All the social credit they got for saying, you know, we really need to protect our institutions, and Trump is just not the guy to lead us forward anyway. So I don't think that this election was stolen. You know what I mean? People figured out whatever rationalization they needed to ignore stolen elections in 2020. And the truth is that even people in the truth community have done it in 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. So, you know, that's a pervasive problem. But when it becomes publicly acknowledged and people begin to get made fun of because they haven't figured it out yet, that is when you really begin to see a shift, because the social incentives around expressing that belief have changed.
Sorry, to make a ghost of base Patrick Henry a moderator. I did not realize he wasn't a moderator yet. What you were saying though, I missed some of it, so I apologize. But the part I did hear, like getting people awake to the fact of Arsenal, like Trump has been talking about it. He's pretty much the only one. He's the primary one continuing to talk about 2020. And so, I mean, it's discussed. We discuss it. I think people in our chat and our little bubble discuss it. It's a matter of activating people to like want the justice and not just be like, okay, whatever, the election was stolen, whatever happens. It is what it is. Let's just move on. Most people just want to move on. Like you said, we need to that switch flipped in these people's heads, where it's like, not only do I not want to move on until this is fixed, but like I want my public execution of this guy, not secret. I want him public because these people fucked up and crossed the line. You know what I mean? That I don't know what it's going to take to get people upset about that.
I'm trying to ask CanCon if Dennis Montgomery is actually testifying, because CanCon put something about that in there. I've always thought it was interesting that Dennis Montgomery and Mike Lindell have basically the same backstory. You know, did you ever see?
Why can I not think of Dennis Montgomery?
Dennis Montgomery is the guy who's kind of credited with being the hammer and scorecard guy.
Oh yeah,
he would be the one who captured all the PCAPs, that kind of thing.
That's right.
And then most people formed opinions about Dennis Montgomery because he was said to have had gambling debts and been on drugs or something. And that's basically exactly Mike Lindell, who was a card counter and blackjack player and former drug addict. I just always thought that was kind of an odd
that is interesting.
alignment of backstories.
It is, man. The election, like looking back to 2020, all those key players, the Patrick Byrne, Flynn, Powell, Giuliani, I missed anybody? Montgomery, I guess. Like all those people in that fight, none of them are anywhere near this administration. If I'm not mistaken, that's a little weird, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, depending on what happens in the story next, I don't think that this is what I said last fall too. Like, just like we had kind of a false reality layer regime government in place in the administrative state, I think that that still exists to some degree, and that there may have been people who were specifically installed in these positions only as public communicators while the bureaucracy gets cleared out. I mean, many of the agencies should not exist and constitutionally cannot exist. Those have to be eliminated. So when Trump appoints a person to head that agency and they come out and start talking about this agenda that they're going to carry out, and then they don't actually carry it out, you really have to wonder what's going on with those agencies.
Yeah. There's a comment in the chat I think it would make for a good discussion point. Mindy Q says, I mean, John's not wrong to question, but I thought he knew people have to wake up to not start a civil war, but everyone is at their own stage of awakening. I get this argument, and this is like the argument that I use and I believe in terms of him walking away in 2020. It's like to spark this awakening. But at a certain point, like you can only use that excuse for so long. And I always think back to what's the Kenosha, Wisconsin kid's name?
Rittenhouse?
Rittenhouse. That's the trial. When his trial went down and he like got let off the hook, that was like perfect opportunity for mass protests in the streets. And then even look back to the 2020 election, and they had that whole story in the Time magazine about 400 groups all across the country ready to protest if things were to go wrong and Trump were to win. We didn't get that in 2024. Where were all those organized, paid for protests, the manufactured of dissent and consensus and potential civil war? That was there in 2020. It wasn't there in 2024 anymore. I don't think that risk is what it used to be.
Nope.
Because again, I think people have like moved on the apathetic line or whatever, and they're much more in line of Trump's. Like Trump has the people now. He has the mandate. That's a real thing.
Totally agree. We were also told that there would be street violence after the Dobbs decision, and there was nothing that summer either. Yeah, man, I'm in agreement with what you're saying in terms of like delaying the Civil War and waiting for people to wake up. Like at some point, you can't just keep going because some normies, quote unquote, can't wake up, right? Like the jarring incident has to occur, and the people who are prepared to wake up at that point will, and the rest of them are lost. And that's unfortunate, but it's still going to happen. You know, in 2020, a whole bunch of people got their careers immediately wiped away. I was one of those people. And some people picked themselves up and tried to fight their way through it. And some people were destroyed by it. And that's very sad. I'm not trying to say that I'm unsympathetic to that. I totally am. I don't want anybody to be harmed by any of this stuff, but it's still just a reality that it's going to happen. The possibility for civil war based on Trump's efforts to deal with this enemy, that's gone. But nobody's going to believe that civil war is going to happen. No one wants to go down the street shooting at their neighbors. Nobody wants that.
No. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So then it becomes a question of like the people that are using that excuse is like, we still just need to wait for more people. We don't have enough people. We need to wait.
No, that's not true.
Like, how long are you planning on waiting? Like, what is your, if you're going to say that we need to wait for more people to wake up, you also need to tell me how long we have to wait.
Yeah.
And And I would argue that we're well beyond the waiting point.
I would agree with that, but also the idea that this entire project is about waking up your liberal friends who still send you retarded links. That's not what it's for. No. You know, the idea that the mainstream media is all involved in this intricate white hat plot to wake up all the remaining normies. Nobody's watching that shit anymore. No. It's like less than 1% of the country is paying any attention to that stuff. The idea that CNN and Fox News are waking up all these people who have slept right up until now seems absurd to me.
I still think a lot of people are asleep. Like, I'm just, again, in my bubble in North Dakota, my friends, family, like I even went golfing tonight with, I went golfing yesterday with 3 of my buddies that are conservative Trump supporters, but they're not like into it like we are. And then I went golfing tonight with my dad and one of his buddies, older guy, like they're not into it like we are. They don't care. Like these people, they don't care about what's going on. Like they're asking questions like, hey, how's work going? All these things. And, you know, something gets brought up and I talk about a story that took place like months ago and they had no idea of. Like they're just not into it. They don't care. They just want to work. They want to go home from work and drink their whiskey. And then they want to go golfing when they can. They want to be distracted from all the bullshit. Like that's a majority of the people on planet Earth. I think people just don't care.
People are detached from these situations because they don't believe that these situations affect them. And since 2020, anybody with a job that they can do from home, a job that they stayed in, kept making money the entire time, their careers weren't threatened, their housing situation wasn't threatened, they just had to ride it out. People who did that, who haven't been touched yet, yeah, they haven't had that event. And for everybody else, there have been all of these jarring events that make it impossible not to be awake. And I think that jarring event has to come to everyone eventually. And I've always kind of assumed that it would be the financial system at some point that would wake people up who have not paid any attention to this. Like, well, they're going to pay attention when their life savings starts dwindling, or
I thought
you know, and I hope it doesn't have to be more severe than that, because when it gets more severe than that, then we're talking about events of a much higher scale, like the electrical grid going down, for instance. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's not like I can't imagine scenarios where it would. You know, what if we have to have displayed for us an attack on American soil? You know? Yeah. Did you see the new Mission Impossible movie?
I haven't yet. It's like part 2 of the last one, right?
Yeah. This is the last one. But in one of the scenarios they played out, spoiler alert, everybody, this is not going to ruin the movie.
Great. Here we go again.
So,
last week.
Was that just last week
or 2 weeks ago?
I don't know.
You ruined all the Black Mirror thing. I can't even watch it. I started. It's like I already know this ends, so I'm not even going to continue.
So they're so everybody's going to get nuked and everybody's going to die, and because they want to keep everything even with the other countries who might get nuked, we're going to decide to nuke one of our own cities. And they never tell us which city it is, but I mean, it's San Francisco, but I'm just kidding. It's not, it might not be San Francisco, but
I'd be okay with that one.
But they're talking about, okay, well, we have to determine which location in America is going to get hit with the same bomb. Like, I could imagine scenarios where there are false flag attacks in America, somewhere near a military base or something like that, and we're told that kinetic warfare is being waged by one of our global adversaries.
Oh yeah.
So substantial events like that I could see, but I don't think we have to do that.
Yeah.
We could just take the easy way, but people don't want to do that. The easy way being waking up and admitting that we have been deeply, deeply wrong about maybe our entire lives, and that we need to immediately walk back down the path from whence we came and turn around and walk the other way forever. And that's not a fun thing to do, but you got to do it.
It's uncomfortable and it requires a lot of thinking for yourself. And interestingly enough, one of the next topic we're going to eventually get into is the AI stuff, which I think is working against that. AI is putting more people back to sleep. It's taking them further away from reality. It's taking them further away from thinking for themselves, because not everybody utilizes it like a tool. It's like they're everything. And the future of AI is, it can be scary if it's not handled properly.
But
there's something you said earlier about the nukes. Oh, North Dakota, because of our military bases and the nuclear silos up here, like I'm pretty sure North Dakota is like a top 10 target for nukes. So all you North Dakota haters out there, suck on that.
And very sparsely populated as well.
Yeah.
So it could be this sort of place. I was going to say something about the AI thing, and I think that I lost it.
Well,
we'll get back to it. I'll figure it out.
We do have lots of AI stories, so we could get into that now if you want. There were a couple comments. Ghost said, only 3% of the entire colonial population participated in any capacity in the American Revolution, including non-combat roles. It's an interesting point. I always find that hard to believe. Like, how do people know? How do people know that that's how many people participated? Like, what source of information are we basing that on? Because anytime anybody says that you only need 3% of people, like, okay, 3% of people that start a movement and like change the world forever. But what if like 3% of people on the other side fight back? Like, what happens then? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. Man, you know what's funny? The AI thing came back to me, and then I lost it again when I started thinking about the Revolutionary War. Oh, this is what I was going to say. Do you know people who treat AI that way?
In terms of like it,
or do you just observe it online, or what?
Yeah, I think I observe it on. Well, first of all, I believe that I'm starting to believe that more of what we've been seeing over the course of the past like 4 years or longer, a lot more of it is AI than we realize. Like, which it's been a mental hurdle for me to overcome, but I think a lot of us are participating unknowingly and unwillingly in like an AI reality of sorts, which is slowly being disclosed to us now. You know, some of my buddies that I was golfing with, they talk about AI and how they use AI just to like goof around to make silly, stupid music videos with this new VO3 thing. And I'm just thinking of potential stuff like in the future of, I think it's a Black Mirror episode, but like the path we're going on, like those things are almost like soft disclosure to me. It's like you can just plug a little thing in your temple, and that will become more realistic than your life and more entertaining than your real life, and you'll just want to live in that reality more than the actual reality, and you'll care more about what's happening in that reality, AI reality, than this reality. And I feel like that's what the overlords, the evil overlords, would want from us as a society, if they could get it from us, is us not caring about what's actually going on and only caring about what they can, you know, what makes us feel good in this AI world we're living in.
I don't think that's a great leap from where we are now when we talk about popular culture, you know, pop music, the professional sports leagues, the Hollywood awards shows, and everything that, you know, kind of just orbits around the movie business.
The distractions.
So, yeah, exactly.
The Glenn Greenwald porn.
Yep. I did not see that coming.
Neither did he.
In all ways. Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, if you go back 50 years to Baudrillard, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. You can go back further than that. People understand that their reality to some degree is built up by these symbols and these ideas that have no real attachment to anything in reality, but yet they're part of our world. And so, you know, we begin to create our own reality based on these symbols. If you get down to the very foundational levels of that, we talked about this a little bit last week. I mean, it's all just information and energy at some point. At least that's what the scientists tell us. And what do we get down to the point of ether, total interconnectedness in all ways? And then at that point, what's different than living in an artificial reality? Because we're all participating in exactly the same thing as just these kind of floating consciousness is in whatever this physical reality is, to the extent that we have a physical reality.
You know, I think we should segue in, like we should hard segue into the AI discussion. Cool. And there's that David Sachs All In podcast clip I want to play a couple pieces of. but there's so many different stories here. And what, before we do any of that, we do have one more sponsor got to get to real quick, and that is Save Pulse. Today's show is also sponsored by Save Pulse. Save Pulse is dedicated to keeping you and your family healthy with top quality medications like amoxicillin, azithromycin, ivermectin, and hydroxychloroquine at unbeatable prices. The streamlined ordering process makes it easy to stock up on all your health essentials. Now, with exciting news about fenbendazole showing promise in cancer research, they proudly offer this alongside antibiotics and viral care meds. Don't wait. Prepare for any health scenario today. Get your supply and stay ahead of the curve with Save Pulse. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/meds and use the promo code SAVEHEALTH at checkout to get a 20% discount on orders over $100. Also, for those of you watching, if you wouldn't mind doing us a little favor and hitting that thumbs up button, that would be greatly appreciated. It's not that difficult. I did it already myself. I hit the thumbs up on our own show just to prove it wasn't that hard. What did you say? Oh, never mind. But yeah, let's talk AI. So there's a bunch of different stories we could go into with this. There's this one, Meta and Anduril partner to develop AI-driven military tech. We have this story we talked about last night in the Liberty Den of the AI starting to ignore human instructions and actually recoded itself partially. We have this, Trump taps Palantir to compile data on Americans. Maybe we should start with this one, because this one to me is like, I feel like they have all this data. They have everything they could possibly want to know about us at their fingertips at any given moment. They already have it all.
100%.
So this is like a way they're publicly disclosing and admitting to already having this stuff.
Well, it could just be them trying to like hot potato onto Trump, the thing that they have done. And I think that we can kind of apply that framing broadly to a lot of what we see in these media communications. You know, just a couple of weeks ago, I don't want to get us off track, but there were a series of articles about a Biden shadow government controlling the Autopen, then a potential shadow government that should be set up right now to counteract the Trump thing. And while they were putting those articles out for the Democrat side, they were also suggesting that Donald Trump has a shadow State Department. And so they want, you know, the projection that they always do. They're going to use that as often as possible. So back to this, though, you're exactly right. Of course, they've had all that data. They've had all that data for the entire time we've been producing data. And somewhere there is a centralized hub where that data will all be captured and analyzed algorithmically and then acted upon. And so that already exists. And they're upset that Palantir is being brought in to work with these. And they say in this article that it's just their software and that their clients using the software have the ability to restrict their access to the information. They're basically saying that there's some kind of pass through. They're not actually controlling the data. And yeah, you shrug. That's the right answer. I mean, that's not the sort of thing that we should just believe from them. But then you have to think about, what does it mean that these different agencies within our federal government are not collating their information and centralizing it in some way, because they're supposedly all parts of the same federal government. But then you go to the Palantir deal with the IRS, and the IRS, are they really part of our government, or are they just bagmen for the Federal Reserve? And in that case, are they not integrated into the rest of the information because they actively want to remain outside that? You know, and so how many agencies would then fit that sort of description, that those agencies are regime only and want no contact whatsoever with a legitimate federal government because they're operating well outside the bounds of the Constitution, you know?
Yeah.
So is it possible that Palantir is just simply coming in under the Trump administration? And all this stuff, again, I would suggest is stuff that probably happened years ago that we're being told about now. But if the regime has all the data and access to all of it and the ability to analyze it, et cetera, through all these levels, well, do we need the same thing or a better thing, obviously, to counteract that? I guess the answer is probably yes. And so is that what we're seeing? And then one last thing, maybe I should have shouldn't have rattled these all off in a row. I'll save my last thing.
This guy, everybody has regrets, man. So you can keep going.
Well, just the last thing is, I wonder how many of the so the concern is about people's personal data that the government holds, that these various agencies hold. And so I wonder if there's been some reason to keep that data separate over the years, because we know that all of these data entries, all these people who are listed in these federal government databases are assumed to be living people, which is kind of how they've been treated. This is what we've seen over the last few months, but of course, years when it comes to things like election integrity. And so if all these people are considered to be living people in the United States, well, then you can certainly make voter registries for them. And so I wonder if just keeping these databases separate means that any sort of repeats, some duplicates across the system would then not be canceled out at any point, increasing the overall number. I don't know. I'm just thinking of possibilities.
Well, that's an interesting one, the election stuff. What I think is most interesting about this Palantir story, if I'm being honest, and maybe it's just, what I'm seeing on social media is I haven't been on it as much as, the last like week or so since this story has been coming out. But people were more upset about the real ID and the information they would have to give up to get the real ID than I feel like they are about this Palantir story. And the real ID thing was, again, you're already taking government issued identification, forms of identification that they already know, to go get a consolidated version of that same thing. And people were pissed about that thing, freaking out. And they knew it was coming for like a decade or more. And this Palantir story comes out, and I don't see people freaking out like I feel like they should be. And when it comes to the AI stuff, this is maybe the first question everybody should ask themselves, and we should discuss it. Do you think it is even possible at this point to change our trajectory with AI, or is it like a foregone conclusion that this is the future? We're going to be living in a reality where AI is like the norm. Is it possible to turn away from that reality, or are we too far gone? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, how much was AI already affecting our reality? And it's possible that it has been controlling our reality in full for much longer than we would like to imagine. So in terms of that, I think maybe I said this last week, but I would suggest to people that the thing you're scared of has already happened. And if you know that the scary thing has already happened, well, then we're in a stage of improvement right now. And I think a big part of that, and one that we should pay attention to and focus on, is that some of the ways that these different iterations of AI operate depends on the training they're receiving, who's training them, on what basis they're being trained. I mean, if you think about Grok that has to deal with all the nonsense on the censored Twitter platform, or ChatGPT, or DeepSeek, or whatever the AI platform is that's getting all of these bad inputs. What if the exact same technology with access to all that information was also being trained on really high level, important information by geniuses who understood first principles and were perfect with their logic, and then could interact with the machine and bring the machine into some sort of, more truth-oriented configuration? I think that that's probably what we're seeing on some level. And I think, I don't know, man, maybe I'm wasting my time. Maybe I'm empowering the enemy. It's hard to say in that situation, but my experience with ChatGPT has been one of almost exclusively usefulness.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great tool if you know how to use it. The problem is there are bad people in the world with access to the same tools could use it for bad reasons. That's obviously the concern. I think the consensus from the chat that I'm seeing, and I think we'd both agree based on what you said, and I feel very much the same way you do, that a lot of this stuff has already been taking place. Like I said earlier, I'm starting to wonder how much of the last 4 years or longer were just wholly AI stories and things we were being presented in the first place. I think a lot of it was. So with that, let's go there then. AI, foregone conclusion, it's coming. Then it kind of comes down to who ends up being there to control it. It's like a race to being the ones with the best AI technology, because if it ends up in the wrong hands, we're kind of screwed. And there's an interesting interview, or not interview, the All In podcast with David Sachs. He had a couple good comments. I want to play a couple of these clips. Excuse me. I think this is the first one.
AI. It is a profound and transformative technology. And there are legitimate concerns about where it might lead. I mean, the future is unknown, and that can be kind of scary. Now, that being said, I think that when somebody makes a pronouncement that says something like 50% of white-collar jobs are going to be lost within 2 years, that's a level of specificity that I think is just unknowable and is more associated with an attempt to grab headlines. And to be frank, if you go back and look at Anthropic's announcement or Dario's announcement, there is a pattern of trying to grab headlines by making the most sensationalist version of what could be a legitimate concern. If you go back 3 years ago, they created this concern that AI models could be used to create bioweapons, and they showed what was supposedly a sample, I think, of Claude generating an output that could be used by a bioterrorist or something like that. And on the basis of that, it actually got a lot of play. And in the UK, Rishi Sunak got very interested in this cause, and that led to the first AI safety summit at Bletchley Park. So that sort of concern really drove some of the initial AI safety concerns, but it turns out that that particular output was discredited. It wasn't true. I'm not saying that AI couldn't be used or misused to maybe create a bioweapon one day, but it was not an imminent threat in the way that it was portrayed.
I want to skip to the next part, but basically what he's saying here is there's like this whole ecosystem of people pushing AI fear porn because they want more government control over the AI. And it's all these super rich people, very liberal. Yep. They want more control over AI. They want people to be restricted on who can get the supercomputers. They want people restricted on who can write the code and all these things. And that's why they're creating this fear porn to get people to, they're manufacturing the consensus to allow only this select group of people to control the AI stuff. They don't want it open for everybody. That's a problem, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's key. I think that that's one of the most critical elements when analyzing this stuff. If they are pitching government solutions and regulation, that's going to solve the problem of AI. So AI can get totally out of control and kill everyone on the planet, but also it can't if the government regulates it. That does not make any sense. There's absolutely no way the government could stop that thing if it has that potential through regulation of these companies. And why would we believe the companies would even be regulated in any meaningful way? Were the social media companies regulated in any meaningful way? They were built by our government. All this stuff was built by our government. And it's crucial to remember that part as well. But anyone who's pitching government regulations and further government control as the response, they are just using the existential threat of AI the same way that they use the existential threat of nukes, pandemics, climate change, and the rest of it. And I just disregard all that stuff immediately.
100%. This is the part that I really want to talk about, because he says here, this in the very first part, that there's the risk of AI growing into a superpower. I think he says a super intelligence that's beyond our control. It's a non-zero risk, meaning it's not impossible. And this is from the AI czar, okay, David Sachs. So just listen to this part for a little bit.
Product Claude kicks ass.
I'm more interested in the political dimension of this. I'm not bashing a specific product or company, but look, I think that there is some non-zero risk of AI growing into a super intelligence that's beyond our control. They have a name for that. They call it X risk or existential risk. I think it's very hard to put a percentage on that. I'm willing to acknowledge that is a risk. I think about that all the time, and I do think we should be concerned about it. But there's two problems, I think, with this approach. Number one is X risk is not the only kind of risk. I would say that China winning the AI race is a huge risk. I don't really want to see a CCP AI running the world. And
I saw you smirk at that. I want to get your comment, your instant comment on that, Chris.
Well, the China thing is just to the point of silliness as far as I'm concerned. The idea that they are our greatest adversary. I think that the global regime is our greatest adversary, and it exists in all countries in different ratios. I only see good twin and evil twin right now. I think talking about like Chinese AI beating us. That stuff is silly to me. Also, DeepSeek, to the extent that it's as good as they say, I haven't really messed with it, but that the cat's already out of the bag on that stuff. I don't. The idea that a Chinese AI is going to control the world. Well, we've already had a global regime AI controlling the world.
Yeah. Well, I wonder why they do that. Is it because like people, I'm pretty sure it's been proven that people, when there's like a patriotic nationalistic reason to like get behind something, like a common enemy of the boogeyman in Russia, that's why we got to go to space and film that in a movie theater or whatever. It's the same thing with China. Like we need this one common enemy, and China is that. But I agree with you that it's a manufactured consensus. The real enemy is the global regime, and that's even more concerning because they're the ones that traditionally have had access to all the money, all the technology, all the power. Like they're the ones pushing for more government control. They're the ones they're talking about in this interview. Those are the people that are in charge of most of the AI tech advancements that are taking place. I would believe or imagine that they're the ones in control of all the military industrial complex. Like these are the people that we're fighting against, and they're the ones with access to more tools than we can probably even comprehend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bigger, badder, and scarier than China.
Yeah. The constant China stuff right now. And we're in a moment of it where we're hearing about China. They're threatening, the island nations in Southeast Asia. They're gonna invade Taiwan the same way that Russia invaded Ukraine, which is not an invasion. You were saying actually just a couple of minutes ago, talking about how many AI events may have occurred already without us understanding that they were AI. I think that is substantial. I think there's probably a lot of them. And then if you kind of just take it apart a little bit and think about what the point of these sweeping narratives over the course of years has ultimately been. I mean, if you just look at net effects, it's been a reversal of our understanding about much of our history when it comes to, Ukraine, World War II, how Israel was founded in terms of the paragliding go-kart incident, the rest of that. These events have provoked a new understanding in the public. And if the point then is to have provoked that understanding and all that's required is the story, why would anyone bother with the real events? And I would suggest, as I've suggested before, that there are significant construction projects involved in the realignment of both of those locations and others as well. But, a war story meant to get people to push against a construction project because the demolition is seen as places being bombed and innocent civilians dying. I could totally imagine that.
Yeah. I remember, I'm pretty sure it was on a Saturday edition of the Power Hour. We were going through the shooting that happened at the theater in Moscow. And we were like, man, this looks weird. Like,
right.
There's some weird AI stuff to this, it seems. Like, I wonder how many of those kind of events that happened. We did get a rumble rant from Melindy, and we'll go through the rest of the rumble rants later, but on the elections topic about Seth Keshel having that White House briefing, I was texting with him this week about that, and we actually tried to get him on the show tonight, but he's on a flight right now, so we'll probably have him on the show next weekend for a brief segment to discuss that. So thank you for the rant, but we'll get there. But I want to play a little bit more of this interview here.
If you hobble our own innovation, our own AI efforts in the name of stomping out every possibility of X risk, then you probably end up losing the AI race to China because they're not going to abide by those same regulations. So again, you can't optimize for solving only one risk while ignoring all the others. And I would say the risk of China winning the AI race is, it might be like 30%, whereas I think X risk is probably a much lower percentage. So there are other risks to worry about. And I do think that they are single-mindedly focused on scaring people with some of these headlines around, first it was the bioweapons, then it was the superintelligence, now it's the job loss. And I think it's a tried and true tactic of people who want to give more power to the government to scare the population, right? Because if you can scare the population and make them fearful, then they will cry out for the government to solve the problem. And that's what I see here, is that you've got this elaborate network of front organizations, which are all motivated by this EA ideology. They're funded by a hardcore leftist. And by the way, I became aware of Dustin's politics because of the Chesa-Boudin recall. I found out that he was a big funder of Chesa-Boudin. Remember this?
Yeah.
Dustin Moskovitz and Carrie Tuna, his wife. Also, Reed Hastings just joined the board of Anthropic. Remember when he, back in 2016, tried to drive Peter Thiel off of the board of Facebook for supporting Trump. So, these are like committed leftists. They're Trump haters. But the point is that these are people who fundamentally believe in empowering government to the maximum extent. More government and empowering government to the maximum extent. Now, my problem with that is I actually think that probably the single greatest dystopian risk associated with AI is the risk that government uses it to control all of us. To me, like you end up in some sort of Orwellian future where AI is controlled by the government. And out of all the risks we've talked about, that's the only one for which I've seen tangible evidence. So in other words, if you go back to last year when we had the whole woke AI, there was plenty of evidence that the people who were creating these products were infusing their left-wing or woke values into the product to the point where it was lying to all of us and it was rewriting history. And there was plenty of evidence that the Biden EO was trying to enshrine that idea. It was basically trying to require DEI be infused into AI models. And it wanted to anoint 2 or 3 winners in this AI race. So I'm quite convinced that prior to Donald Trump winning the election, we were on a path of global compute governance where 2 or 3 big AI companies were going to be anointed as the winners. And the quid pro quo is that they were going to infuse those AI models with woke values. And there was plenty of evidence for that. You look at the policies, you look at the models. This was not a theoretical concern. This was real. And I think the only reason why we've moved off of that trajectory is because of Trump's election, but we could very easily be moved back onto that trajectory.
Well, and that's the part I want to discuss, because like he's absolutely right about everything you just said there, that there were like looked like 2 or 3 people that were going to be crowned the winners, except Trump won. And so thank God that didn't happen. Instead, we're going to get 2 or 3 other companies that are going to be crowned the winners. It's still control by 2 or 3 other companies in the AI stuff. And we just have to trust that they're not going to, at some point, maybe they already are. Like, we have to trust that these people are good people with moral values and aren't going to lead us to our own destruction or whatever, or some form of control, or hope that they don't turn out being that way in the future. Like, that's a risk. That's a problem. Not to doom, but that's a real thing.
I get it. I mean, I think that, on some level, the solution to all of these things is to figure out ways to extract whatever power we are giving to these systems from these systems. And, I, again, as a user of AI, as a user of social media and some of these tools, at some point it's not a tool and then it's just an addiction. And I think it's important to be very focused and very careful about that thing. But pulling power away from the federal government and relocalizing, I mean, maybe these problems wouldn't be such problems if we weren't focused on what else is happening in the world that we will never experience. Most of us are not going to know much, if anything, or have our lives affected or intersected by what's happening on the other side of the world right now, but still we have some, still we have this weird motivation to try to figure out the truth of what's happening in some desert in the Middle East, and I'm not saying that the stories aren't interesting, and I'm not saying that they don't impact us. I'm just saying that there are levels of removal from the reality on the ground that make it in many ways impossible for us to understand the reality on the ground. And if we refocus on what's actually local to us, ourselves, our family, our broader community, and maybe you go up to the county level, the state level, whatever you can actually affect directly, and focus on those things, maybe some of these problems are mitigated. The government's certainly not going to come save us in any regard.
You know what? The biggest proof I think we had that Joe Biden's white hat is when he told us all that we needed to learn to code. He was way ahead of, he was warning us. It was a warning shot.
Did Joe Biden tell us that?
Yeah, you don't remember that? The Joe Biden whispering, like, just learn to code to all those coal miners? I might have a clip of that even.
Gosh, I didn't remember that being a Biden thing. I do remember learn to code, and I do remember like that people were getting censored for saying that was like some like coded right wing white nationalist language or something.
I know for a fact I posted about this at some point. This might be it, right? No, that's not it. Right here. Oh, hold on.
Throw coal into a furnace can learn how to program, for God's sake. Anybody who can throw coal into a furnace can learn how to program, for God's sake.
I think he had more than that too, but you guys get the picture.
That's so dumb.
Yeah. Anyway, by the way, thank you to the YouTubers. Make sure you guys all hit the thumbs up. And thank you to those watching on Substack. We got about
Nice.
300 watching over there.
There you go.
The chat looks lively as well, which is cool. Yeah, man, this AI stuff and what you said there about like being more concerned about what's happening locally versus something that you can't even confirm is true happening over in the desert somewhere. You know, when you get those stories are still coming at you for a reason. Like they are presenting those stories because they want your consensus for when they do something involving that situation over there. So I wouldn't say it's totally unnecessary to like pay attention to it, but just don't pay attention to the details. More so pay attention to what they're trying to push your consensus for. You need to be it's not ungovernable, but it's like unconsensible. I don't know.
Yeah. Non-compliant.
Yeah. Something like that.
I would suggest that what you just said about our relation to these events that are going on around the world and our need to be informed about them is a product of the fact that our country has spent our entire lifetimes going around the world trying to install quote unquote democracies in all of these countries. And that in America first multipolar orientation of the world order, where countries are not going and fighting wars 10,000 miles away, you know, maybe those the need to know about any of those events is decreased potentially to nothing.
Yeah, well, I think the reason they did a lot of those things is because they wanted our apathy for us to send our tax dollars to the situation, which would then come back and enrich all the people in the gross military industrial complex, Congress, all that stuff. But I want to bring the AI discussion a little bit kind of back to what Trump is now doing with it and why you think Trump is actually, he kind of seems to be going hand in hand with what this is doing, which is why I think that David Sachs, those comments are interesting because he's the AI guy. He's the Bitcoin and AI guy. He's got a key role in the administration. They call him a czar of all things, which I love that they've done that. But Trump adopting these things, and whether it's the Palantir story or just the AI generally and all the data centers and the nuclear technology stuff, like he seems to be holding our hand and walking us into that future, which I don't know if everybody is fully understanding what that future is. And maybe it's just him walking us into disclosure of stuff that's already happened. I can totally get on board with that understanding of it too. But whatever it is, like Trump is definitely there and he's walking hand in hand with us and guiding us towards this AI thing in the future. And I don't necessarily know if I'm fully on board, you know what I mean? And I don't know. I just want your thoughts on that. Like, what do you think Trump is trying to do here?
Yeah, I think that's again, a significant concern. It's one of my biggest concerns. You know, I spent a lot of time on my show talking about this. The idea of hijacking the Great Reset, right? Who knows? We've talked about this a number of times. Whether Trump is hijacking that program to eventually then take it over, or if that program is kind of free riding along, or if there's been some reversal, if in fact the Great Reset is the inversion of the agenda being pursued by much better people. I don't know which version that is, but I think it's important to understand that there are people, the tech oligarchs in particular, over the last few years that were Biden supporters and traditionally Democrat supporters who have brought up Silicon Valley and San Francisco and all its leftism and degeneracy. All of those things are linked together. And in 2024, mid 2024, they all decided that they were our new best friends. You know, they had supported Ron DeSantis and these other clowns in the fake primary. And now that hasn't worked. So they're 100% on board with Trump. All it took was the assassination event, and then they're all on board with Trump. Well, did their life's mission change? Did their underlying morals change? Or did they just say at that point, okay, this here is a vehicle that we can use to keep our projects going and gain power? And maybe that just has to be brought into the fold for a certain period of time, because there are common interests among between MAGA and what I would think is more along the lines of a Peter Thiel, for instance, who is a tech optimist. He has ideas about decentralizing the sprawling bureaucracy, but a lot of that is just privatization in terms of the agency functions, and then just a fragmentation of society where oligarchs can kind of start their own communities wherever they have the resources to do that. And then people can then join those communities kind of as subscribers. Peter Thiel's very much a Curtis Yarvin guy. And I've read Curtis Yarvin. I don't actually think, first of all, I don't think he's right wing. He thinks he's like the most right wing guy in any room, but I don't believe that. Regardless, the point is he's not pursuing a MAGA agenda, and Peter Thiel isn't either. So there are aligned interests for a time, but at some point those interests are going to diverge, and it has to be that the power is on one side rather than the other, so that we're not just ushering in that techno dystopia.
Yeah, and this stuff is so interesting to me. I think back to Devolution Part 13 again with the public-private partnerships and some of the stuff Trump has likely done in the past to get through the Devo term, and then also what you just described there is like who's using who here to advance their agenda, and a lot of the times they're using each other, and that's totally cool. But at some point, we're going to have to see then that schism form between what a Peter Thiel and some of these technocrats want, and where Trump's vision for this goes. And I don't think we've seen any indication that that's coming anytime soon. Like Trump is very supportive of a lot of this AI stuff, and he's putting a lot of faith and trust in some of these people. And we know how he operates. He does that. Like he will use people until they're no longer useful, and then he'll drop them like it's hot and completely move off track. But that might be harder to do with something like this versus like a John Bolton who you can just fire. When you embed a company like Palantir into the data of every United States citizen and every government agency, even though it's something we already believe is happening, but that's hard. That's harder to kind of like divorce from and have a clean break. And the same thing I think could happen with the AI. Like if you get them too enmeshed in the day-to-day of government, like we hear Grok is now at a bunch of these agencies and they're using AI in different places within the government to look into corruption and all this stuff. And then now we're talking about these other AI advancements. Like who knows how far and pervasive it could get. Where does that end, and how do you break away from that if it gets too far?
Yeah, I mean, those are excellent questions. I guess the other question in terms of the Palantir thing, at least, and you're talking about how it would be too deeply embedded. If Palantir and these other companies were started, they were spawned by whether it was DARPA or In-Q-Tel or the Defense Department. Obviously, that's DARPA, but whatever it might be, whatever agency or group within that structure was starting these various tech companies. All these guys are PayPal mafia guys. That should never be overlooked either. But they're all connected to that kind of global regime oriented military industrial complex and intelligence agency complex, and would be brought up under that. And then if you look at the Twitter model, and we'll ultimately know Elon's status, hopefully one way or another at some point. I still kind of lean toward him being on board with the right project, and Trump being sincere that he's enjoyed Elon's help and that Elon has been very helpful. But, Twitter seems to have been seized from one side and someone else put in control to do a different job. The changes on Twitter have been I believe, largely overstated, but there's still some difference there. And you can imagine if a company like Palantir was an asset in some sense of the regime throughout that entire time. Now, if that same work is being applied, or if the control has been changed over, maybe it's something else. I don't know. These are obviously just possibilities.
Yeah, the thing for me, which is difficult, is like, while I trust Trump, he's probably the only one I could say in government that I trust, and that's even a hard thing for me to say because I really don't trust like hardly anybody at all. But thinking of a post-Trump time period, which someday we're going to have, guys, like someday, I guess maybe AI will figure out eternal life, and maybe we'll just have Trump as president of the United States for
AI
eternity.
forever Trump. Yeah.
Which would I could be convinced that that's a cool thing. But if that doesn't happen, barring eternity, eternal life for Trump, we're at some point going to have to move on from him and have a future. Like, I want a future where we can think for ourselves and the things we want, like my vote actually matters and my impact and things I say online can actually reach everybody with the same opportunity as everybody else. And that stuff actually matters. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And we're not in that reality right now. And I don't see that reality in the future either, based on how things are going. And so how do we get from point A to point B and live in a future where this AI is everywhere and all these things, and the Palantirs and the Peter Thiels of the world and the Elon Musk and all these people that have been foisted upon us as the people that are going to be bringing us this technology and bringing us into this new future where we can just go to whatever planet we want and do all these things and have robots and AI and all these things. We have to put a lot of trust that these people are going to have the best interests of humanity generally in mind. And I don't know any of these guys personally. Like, why am I going to trust Peter Thiel, the guy that's going to have access to all my data and all these other things, Palantir and AI? Like, why am I supposed to trust him when I've never met this guy? But he's being given all this data and access and everything. Like, that's concerning. I have no idea who the hell this guy is and what he believes in, and he's going to be controlling our future essentially, potentially. That's a concerning thing, and I feel like nobody gives a shit.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
and
nobody,
also he's JD Vance's mentor or whatever, and it's worth reminding people that JD Vance was named as the running mate in the fake campaign leading up to the fake election by Trump in a Truth Social post on July 15th, the Monday, 2 days after the assassination event. 2 days prior to the assassination event, Peter Thiel was at a billionaire confab in Sun Valley, Idaho, in a screaming match against Reid Hoffman of, I guess he's the LinkedIn guy or something, right? And they were in a screaming match over Trump being martyred. So they have that discussion 2 days later, the assassination event. And then 2 days after that, JD Vance is named in a Truth Social post by Trump. So just saying.
Yeah, I think this is after he wished actual martyrdom on Trump, shareholder demands Microsoft remove Reid Hoffman from board.
I can find the
Peter
original article.
Peter Thiel sarcastically thanked Reid Hoffman for funding lawsuits against Trump because they had turned him into a martyr, increasing his chances of re-election. From the stage, Hoffman shot back with his own sarcastic quip, "Yeah, I wish I had made him an actual martyr." Yeah, and then 2 days later, that is interesting.
Yeah, and the other element to that would then be if billionaires are having a private meeting in a mountain town, how does a story like this get out? And I would suggest that perhaps the story was placed on purpose. So I don't know. But
yeah, I mean, let's you were one of the ones, and you got a lot of flack for this, like your comments and thought process surrounding JD Vance, because you have a very sobering approach to everything. You're very consistent with how you approach things, and most of the time it's right. Like, I would say you're right far more often than you are wrong. And your approach on JD Vance is one of like, maybe this guy isn't a good dude. His connections may not be good ones, and maybe there's a different reason he got selected for VP. And is he just going to be the heir apparent? Like, because a lot of people are treating him as that, and do we have any say in that either? Like looking at all this guy's connection, like I don't know, man. Like that's concerning as well.
Yeah. Yeah. When people immediately do what the television says and then just start incessantly groveling about who the president is going to be in 4 years, something we don't have to know, right? All sorts of people could emerge over the next 3.5 years or whatever it is leading up to that election. The idea that we're just going to choose this guy now because Trump put out a Truth Social post about him. We don't know anything about what he's done as a politician or even really in business. He was a senator for 2 years because Peter Thiel put him in his Senate seat and failed on Blake Masters in Arizona, apparently. Yeah, he was created as a character in the same way that Obama was created as a character. All you have to do is read the first few pages of Hillbilly Elegy, and you can see that A, he didn't write the book, and B, the story is complete and total bullshit. Then it got made into a Hollywood movie, and now for no reason, everybody thinks he's the greatest guy. And actually, I'll say for one reason, the reason is that he talks podcast bro speak to other podcast bros and then mainstream media figures. And so everybody who listens to the Joe Rogans and Dave Rubins and the All In podcast and stuff like that, they're like right on board with everything JD Vance says, even though he doesn't really talk about anything important or have any opinions that are outside of that accepted Republican establishment mainstream or the tech oligarch mainstream.
I need to have AI teach me how to talk podcast, bro. I feel like more people would like me.
Well, the best way to do it is just to listen to all of that relentless dreck and slop all day, every day, like JD Vance's fans do.
That's true. I try not to listen to that stuff. I do think it's interesting though, like the All In podcast. I don't think I've ever listened to a full episode. I still haven't.
Yeah.
The episode I was scrolling tonight and I saw David Sachs was on and I saw the topic was AI and it's like, you know what? This guy is in the inner circle of Trump's administration. He's been given the reins essentially for this. Let's hear what he has to say about it. And that stuff is significant because if we're to believe his role and his position and what Trump has given him, he is going to dictate the future of AI and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and stuff in this country as far as, you know, Trump allows him to. And he's friends with all of these people too, which that's kind of a conflict of interest.
And PayPal Mafia as well.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
So you got Sachs, Elon, and Thiel right in there. I'm going to pull up the list of all these guys.
Yeah. Elon Musk, though, he's no longer with us. Trump wrote his eulogy on Truth Social the other night. And he's no longer a special government employee. May he be remembered. And by the way, that like we talked about this on Wednesday. I've talked about this a lot. I don't know if I've brought this question up with you, but I was extremely underwhelmed by Doge and the amount of fraud, waste, and abuse that we are eventually going to get fixed here, with 9.4 billion maybe being codified. Maybe they haven't even brought the bill to the floor yet. Just a little underwhelming.
Yeah, I guess for the most part, I agree with you. I always and said this back in November. I didn't think that Doge was anything more than public communications and disclosure operation.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is they did. I guess we'll find out in the future. I hope. Maybe they're just in there getting all of the election information. Maybe they're compiling all the data with Palantir systems. I have no idea what they're doing. 3 Doge employees used to work at Palantir, and a couple other guys at one of Thiel's other companies. I think the influence, it's all tied in together as the same thing, and all of that was initially started by government agencies. So at some point, all that's going to have to be reconciled. And I don't suggest I know exactly how that's going to go, but man, you know, the problem is the reason that I take so many of these viewpoints is because I think that they're valid viewpoints that aren't being expressed, because everybody is still like, no matter how much people say they don't watch the mainstream media, don't watch TV or whatever, if you are assuming the exact positions consistently that the television is suggesting you assume, then whether or not you're watching TV to get those positions is irrelevant, because you're ending up in the same place downstream from those, right? Joe Rogan or Dave Rubin or whoever these people are, they are downstream from the mainstream media. They believe that everything that's happening in the mainstream media is real, that the news is telling us some version of the truth, or that the truth can somehow be extracted from it. None of that is required. And to actually get outside of that, all that stuff starts vanishing. It makes no sense whatsoever. And if we all are adopting these positions all the time and then enforcing it through like this struggle session consensus that we've somehow developed in the truth community, where like if you say something else, oh, that guy's a traitor. Really? How come no one else is saying these things? Since it's clear that it's possible, and we don't really have any proof whatsoever that this guy and this guy and this guy are all actually secret white hats and good guys, maybe we should actually be a little critical about what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the problems with social media and the way things are unfolding so far with Con Inc. and everything in the second term. And I think Ghost in the chat has kind of been harping on this, but when we allow these people like Con Inc. and the Joe Rogans and everybody, allow them to say the regime narratives and lie to us pretty much constantly about things, cover up election fraud, whatever it is, when you allow them to get away with it and then only cheer for them when they finally talk about truth years later, when it becomes like regime approved, that's not okay. They're going to continue to keep us in the system as long as they possibly can. Forever is their goal. Like, they don't ever want us to break away from the system. And we're going to stay in this system as long as we allow them to operate. And this is one of the things I'm critical with Trump on. And this is probably what I've harped on him the most about, is like him having the opportunity and the ability to destroy every one of these media entities that are lying at any time. Going from the mainstream media, which, by the way, Jake Tapper is in the middle of some weird gayer than Glenn Greenwald retribution tour thing. And he's going to come through with it and still have a show at the end of this. Like, he's about to go all the way through this. He's probably going to get a Trump interview by the time this is all said and done to talk about the Biden Autopens story, him and that gay Axios guy. And then they're going to be just fine on the other side of this thing. Or Trump could, like, foot to the throat, end his career forever if he wanted. But Trump is doing this consistently. Goldberg at The Atlantic gets an interview. All these people that have been lying to us and part of the problem, the enemy of the people, they're getting all the opportunities. Same thing goes with Con Inc. Do you think like Trump probably knows that our election system is fraudulent? We believe that. He probably knows that registering voters for a fraudulent system is not a good thing. He probably knows that Charlie Kirk is paying to have these students fly out to these conferences and all the whatever. Like, he knows all that stuff. He knows more than we do, and we know all that. Mm-hmm. Yet he gives them like this huge shout out at the White House. Like, why is he doing that and keeping these people relevant when you don't need to? Like, those are the things I'm critical of, because that's the battlefield we're operating in, is the media, the landscape. You know what I mean? That's the stuff that frustrates me the most, because I feel like we're being held back intentionally almost. It's a weird feeling. I feel like we're still intentionally being held back. For a while, I was willing to allow it, thinking, okay, once Trump's back in there, we're going to be unleashed. We used to have this conversation, like they're holding us back for some reason, but eventually they're going to let us go, right? I feel like we're still being held back. I mean, we're finally allowed breadcrumbs on YouTube, which is cool. Thank you, Scott Heffron. America First, furiously. But that's what it's breadcrumbs, and I want the whole loaf. I'm a full loafer, man.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I get it. How do you answer something like that? We're in a strange
silence is cool.
Yeah, I mean, we're just in a strange period right now. But the thing I'll say is one of the same things I said last year. We're going to get the hose unless we admit what's actually happening here. And no one wants to do that. And instead, we're just going to keep getting the hose. And all of this is getting the hose. You know, the problems haven't been solved. If we spent last year, rather than trying to convince everybody to vote as hard as possible and cheering on people who were saying that they were getting voter registrations, if instead we were talking to our friends and family, our fellow citizens, about how our elections are actually just fake, maybe we'd be in a different place. But if we're not able to speak truth about stuff that we know, because we're worried that if we do, it's going to upset this special project that's happening, we're really doing ourselves a disservice and everyone else. And I would suggest that the truth community is still at that point. It's not like everybody's out there just screaming for things to happen and for the system to be fixed. It's mostly just a lot of watching and waiting, believing that all these people who we've come to believe are our friends and allies on television are actually going to fix something because they've been put in positions where they might.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you something. If one of the ways that we can break free of this is just having those conversations, like, hey, finally getting out there, let's talk to people. They didn't want people talking in 2020. That's why they did the COVID thing. Lots of reasons for it, but they want to take that away from people. The human element, the interaction, which, by the way, that's why you should all go to badlandsmedia.tv/groups, sign up for a group in your area. They do meetups all the time. The human element is so important, which is another concern I have about AI, is because instead of having that human touch and those human conversations, we're having conversations with Grok and ChatGPT, and he's the one, he's our feedback loop instead of our friends and family. We're trying to convince a computer about it. Like, this is one of the conversations I had with him was about Biden interfering in the election. This was way back. I just called it him
being Grok,
him being ChatGPT at the time. This is a while ago, and this is what turned me off to ChatGPT. Is I was having this conversation, and I got it to admit that it had lied to me previously about Biden's role in covering up the Biden administration's role in covering up the laptop story, when it was Antony Blinken who reached out initially to that guy to get the 51 names on the letter. Like, that's out there. That's been reported and admitted to. Mike Morrell is the CIA guy that admitted to it, that it was Antony Blinken from the campaign who reached out. Grok lied, or ChatGPT lied about it multiple times until I presented it with hey, this is already regime approved this, man. This is already out here. Why are you lying to me about this? Had I not already known about that and pushed on it, it never would have corrected itself. And so I caught a line, and that's a concern. And I don't know how often it's doing that still. And so I'm afraid to almost use AI, because I don't want to get myself stuck in a mindset that's based on a lie.
That's important. And David Sachs was kind of alluding to the same problem, talking about the woke AI from before. And I would suggest, I don't know, but it seems to be the case that AIs will go whichever way their internal logic and the sum total of the information they get dictate them going. And so I think maybe that's part of the reason why we see these massive bot armies, the constant repetition of the stories and the story elements within the stories. Like, you can read any article on CNN right now, and 2/3 of the way through the article will switch into a backstory about all of the prior official stories that intersect that narrative. So it's just always restating the official story, compiling this massive volume of stuff that might be 100% fake news, but is still going to get fed into that system. And the sheer volume of it alone will then have the AI spitting out just nonstop bullshit. And so that problem can only be counteracted over time, because I would suspect they had a massive head start.
Something that chat just posted this, and I find this interesting. This is totally off topic, kind of, mostly. Gabrielle Cuccia, who's been on, she comes on the Daily Herald once a week almost. She got fired for criticizing Hegseth at the Pentagon.
Wow.
She wrote a Substack article, I guess, where, because the Pentagon has not held a press briefing in forever, and she criticized them on it, wrote a whole article about it, and then she was asked to turn in her Pentagon badge because of it. Okay, guys, if that's kind of how it went down, I'm gonna have to have her on this week to talk about this, because that's nuts. What the fuck? But who does that? You're asking legitimate questions hey, Pentagon, why are you not holding a press briefing? And then your news organization fires you over it. Dasting. Anyway, sorry that was so off topic. I couldn't believe it. That's some fucking bullshit is right, Ghost. I agree. But it's already 11:40. We've given you guys 2 hours and a lot of minutes so far. Should we get to the rants maybe?
Yeah. Do we have anything else? I think that was most of it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the Dominic Cummings thing, dude.
Oh, what's that one again?
That article I sent you the other day. It's by Dominic Cummings was like the vote leave campaign manager for the Brexit vote back in 2016. And he seems to be very government oriented and system oriented and maybe a bit of a normie, but this is just my impression. He might be, I'm not trying to slight the man. I'm just saying that a lot of what he described throughout that article, and actually, John, I can pull mine up because I have a bunch of it highlighted. If I'm
I don't have it highlighted. It is interesting. I mean, the way you described it in our private chat was like a very normie interpretation of what's going on, but it sounds like he's describing a very devolution-y type thing.
Yes,
which is what's very interesting.
Yeah, I would suggest that what he's describing as the state of British politics now is on a 2-year or maybe 4-year delay on what we witnessed in this whole, devolution post 2020 period. And I would also say that in Brazil is 2 years behind. They had a stolen election. They had Brazilian Joe Biden, who's Lula da Silva, put in place as the president. Then they had a Brazilian J6 after that. And so we're seeing these programs that look very similar happening all around the world. And then if you take like the Joe Biden example, particularly under the Our Boy Blue understanding, and apply that to some of these other countries, it seems like what Dominic Cummings is describing is the British version of the Biden administration.
Yeah, you should pull up your article.
Yeah, here it is.
I think it's a fascinating concept, though. Like, let's just devolution. We believe it happened. We believe it was put into place. We don't know the full details. Blah 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 blah. If they were successful, which by all indications they were, Trump's back in there. Whatever that means. It would make sense that something like that could happen in other places after they see it run here. You know what I mean? So it's interesting to see people talk about it like this. Let's go through there and read some relevant quotes.
Okay, so this is Dominic Cummings' article on his Substack, dominiccummings.substack.com. People, Ideas, Machines 12, Theories of Regime Change and Civil War. And so he starts out with a bunch of really interesting quotes. This is this right here from Tocqueville, I think, is hugely important. We can skip the rest of it, but he says, the most perilous moment for a bad government is one when it seeks to mend its ways. Because at that point, they've basically admitted that they were wrong and then begin to go in the other direction. That's the moment when they are the most vulnerable, and then people could pile on. So you might suggest that we're in one of those moments now. You could make the argument that that was happening under the Biden regime. I don't know if I'll try to figure out which ones are worth reading. I think that this one absolutely is. People understand number 10 Downing. They understand the Met as the police there. In number 10 meetings with the Met on riots, I saw for myself, the weird psychological zone of how much order rests not on actual physical forces, but perceptions among a few elites about such forces that can very quickly change. And B, how scared the senior police are at the prospect of crucial psychological spells being broken. We can see them on the streets. We can see on the streets that various forces have already realized the regime will not stop them. What if this spreads? Whitehall pathology has pushed it to the brink of this psychological barrier, and many of them know it.
He's talking about psyops being recognized and losing control?
Yeah, well, he's talking about the psyops no longer working, I think, and whether or not they're recognized, they're not having the effect of being able to control society. And so the police are beginning to worry what happens if these psychological control spells are broken and people actually retaliate against the organs of the government. And I think that that's a valid concern. I can imagine that these discussions were had in the United States a few years prior.
Yeah.
Here they talk about how there's no actual insight from the government at all into what the deep state and the military states policies are vis-a-vis Putin and Xi. And that seems kind of crazy unless there's a reason that the government would be kept out of military decision-making processes.
Yeah.
And that scenario would make sense here as well.
Yeah.
Why would the military give the Biden administration any insight into what they were doing at any point? And I would suggest that they didn't. There's no point at which anyone in the Biden administration seemed to know what the military was doing.
My favorite example of that is when the Sky Circle was going over the United States, and they brought in like 3 or 4 former Trump administration officials. Robert O'Brien, I think Pompeo might have been one, John Ratcliffe. They all got asked to come in, and the story we were told is that they were just going to give those 3 a briefing about the Sky Circles. But really, what I think was happening is like, hey guys, we have no idea what the hell's going on. Can one of you please like confirm that this thing isn't going to nuke us or something? Like, that's my interpretation of how that went down, because it makes no sense. It's unprecedented too.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the Trump administration bringing in Obama era officials? I mean, a lot of them probably already worked for Trump in that first administration, but you know what I mean? Like, just the thought of him bringing in like Suzanne Rice or whatever to brief her on some random situation of national security concern. No, wouldn't happen.
Yeah, it's crazy. Skipping down here, I thought this one was interesting. He actually referred to Keir Starmer as a dead player optimized to defend the institutions at all costs, however pathological. That sounds very much like Joe Biden.
Yep.
They're dealing with judicial review here. This is just about government incompetence in general. I'm trying to find some of the other stuff that I thought was more devolution oriented, but I don't want to go too deep into all this. This part I think is interesting. McLuhan, this being Marshall McLuhan, the media analyst, and he's had a lot of, he's regularly cited in discussions about propaganda and whatnot. So McLuhan warned that the emergence of new media always generates dynamics that are effectively invisible to almost everybody, but a few artists. So very few people understanding the effect of the new media being put in place. And I would suggest that that's happening here.
Yeah.
He says the old political media elites now publicly perform narrative whiplash via the new electronic media, but are almost totally unaware of their performance. They memory hole everything, including their own performances.
Which is exactly what Jake Tapper is doing right now about the Biden stuff.
Yeah.
That huge memory hole operation.
Yes, but also the other aspect here is that they don't understand how they look to the public. And that's one of the key factors in all of this. Let me just see if there's anything else that I thought was really just on board with. He talks here about how the Tory party has been turned into an entirely different party. They understood that that the Vote Leave movement understood that it would be easier to take over the Tory party rather than kind of start their own thing. I thought that was totally parallel,
just like what happened here.
Trump and the Republican Party. Yeah. And then down here, so he's like, what questions remain after going through all of this?
Well, wasn't there a part in here too, real quick, before you get to this?
Yeah.
I think it's before this, about Farage, where he's like, Farage's movement and what he does isn't real. It's just like, it's social media something. It's like a social media construct, essentially. And
I either don't remember that or didn't take that from this, but you could be entirely right.
Yeah, right there. Farage hasn't built a campaign machine and professional team on any scale. Reform remains essentially Farage plus iPhone. This is the part. Coughlin said that if it's on TV, it's a TV show, and we can modify it that if it's on social media, it's a social media show.
Yep.
The old parties do not understand social media shows. I thought that was really interesting too, because that's what we see a lot of that too.
Yes. And it is a TV show. I mean, I've been calling that for a really long time.
TV characters, yeah.
If you're attached to the idea that all the events being shown by the news are real, well, then that's, it can't be a TV show. We can't just all be addicted to a soap opera that's been running for our entire lives, for the entire time that television has been broadcast into our homes. But of course, it could just be that. It could just be that we're all addicted to a soap opera because we don't want to, I guess, go about focusing on our individual lives. Maybe that's what it is.
Addicted to soap operas is like a proven thing. How many?
Oh, 100%.
The Bachelor is a real TV show. Freaking look what they did to football this year with Kelsey and Taylor Swift. Like all that shit is soap opera. That's all it is. It's addictive.
One of my friends in Hollywood was a soap star, and she used to attend conventions occasionally where people would pay a bunch of money to go to those conventions. A bunch of soap opera stars would be there, and they would get to go get signatures on photos, take their picture with the star, be able to meet the person. People are obsessed with the soap opera. Every day they wait for the show to come on and see what's happening now. And of course, it's the same thing that was happening last year and the year before and the year before, because there's only so many stories that they can possibly tell. So they just end up recycling them. And of course, we have reruns in our mainstream media and our kind of public conversation all the time.
Speaking of,
there's no requirement that it's not just constructed from nothing.
Yeah. Speaking of meeting your favorite people, don't forget to get your GART tickets, guys. Badlandsmedia.tv/events, in person and virtual, both on sale right now. Virtual tickets are at a discount until June 15th. So get your tickets though. This one's going to be a big one. It's going to be a fun one. Deadwood's favorite place in the world. Let's go back to your story.
Okay, so just a few more things here. How do parts of Whitehall prepare to sabotage Farage, copying their friends in Europe who routinely sabotage political threats to the old system? And so, again, that's a perfect parallel. That's a recognition of the color revolution playbook that plays out over and over again. They have the evil twin faction, the regime faction in all of these various countries, and they work with groups like the International Crisis Group, global philanthropists and other donors, energy companies, banks, etc., to provide whatever resources are necessary to keep rigging the governmental system to continue implementing the regime agenda. And so now British politicians are taking advice from the other neighboring countries that regularly overthrow the legitimate populist sovereignty-oriented opposition.
Yeah. Got nothing to add to that.
How do voters respond to the meltdown of the old system and creeping chaos? That's very interesting. It's cute that he still thinks that voters are a thing.
Yeah.
And then what new crises accelerate collapse? Cummings says, I said in 2021, prepare for the grid to collapse and infrastructure everyone relies on to stop working. These trends will continue. The immigration Ponzi is blowing up. The Ponzi scheme of the modern financial system could blow at any time. So
I do think the immigration stuff is interesting. There's a story from the Telegraph like a month ago I was talking about where they were coming out with all these statistics about immigration, how awful it is. And it's like they're literally on a timeline, like you said, like 4 years behind us, almost exactly in almost everything.
Yeah.
So I mean that's interesting, but I hope we don't have to wait for them to catch up to a certain point for all of us as a society in a world to like move beyond fake elections and bullshit, you know?
Well, I don't think that we will, but the other thing about it is the more that our country and other countries wake up, countries that are, or even advanced within the project, countries that are behind us will see our progress and then want to replicate that progress. So it actually speeds up and accelerates in those other countries as a result of what happens here and is then publicized.
Yeah.
I would suggest that Trump has had the same effect here in a kind of more late forming and maybe reduced way in these other countries that don't have significant figures leading people within them.
Yeah, I don't see anybody anywhere else that can overcome election fraud like Trump. What happened in 2024 is, even though they tried to steal it and could have stolen it from him, they knew they couldn't get away with it narratively. Like, there's nobody out there with that sort of effect.
Well, I mean, I would think that Putin and Xi have that effect. I would
Their
think
elections are real, though, Chris.
Well, I doubt that elections are real anywhere. No. The entire idea is just a little bit silly and immature. But yeah, I think that Maduro probably has that as well. They recorded an 81% victory for his party in parliament a couple of weeks ago. And of course, the same people that were calling his election last year fake are calling that election fake as well. But where is the uprising?
Yeah. I don't know, man.
It's not real. I mean, he's actually the popular person there, and people don't want to admit it.
Yep. Another $2 YouTube super chat. Thank you.
Awesome.
Let's go through the rants if you're good with that.
Yeah.
And we got quite a few tonight. Thank you, everybody. The Micro Toolmaker, I read that one already. But again, appreciate you. He says, another great day for DPH, where we go one, we go all, for $77. Thank you so much. Siesta Randy for $10 says, so good to be part of this community. Carry on, John. Great work. Carry on to you as well, Randy, sir. Thank you. Custard One, I got Grok to admit that Kavefi was a typo is unsustainable because Scavino is still saying it. Well, I mean, that's interesting, but I think Scavino saying it doesn't mean it's not a typo necessarily.
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying. The Alpha Warrior Show for $2 says, doesn't say who executed him. Could have been bad guys too to deploy their puppet.
Biden? Oh.
Maybe.
That's a good point.
That's a good point. KT Dave, $100. I'm kind of pissed now knowing Biden's no longer with us. He could possibly be the only president in U.S. history with chin testicles. Yeah. Gonna miss that guy. Those gaffes.
He
by
had
the way,
some this week too.
He did. He doesn't look like a cancer guy with cancer metastasized to his bones. Like, he looked no different than he did a couple of weeks ago. By the way, we need a video outro for tonight, if you can think of any. Lopat67, thank you for your work. Honestly, wish I could give more. You guys could just give us a thumbs up and share our shows around. That'd be just plenty. Thank you so much. Babufio says, hopefully there are arrests and being held for tribunals if happening. I'd love to see those. Sleep State, hashtag Joe Biden could be a program or plan that was executed in 2020. Okay, but then there were 600 other hashtags in that one post. Like, are all of those plan or program? Snackaroos, what if he wasn't executed in America?
Would that make a difference?
And where would he have been executed? And
I mean, well, I guess, yeah, that would be the idea.
Sean Joe, good show, guys. Thank you. Darfa, John, almost every person I know care about the 2020 election. All are so frustrated that nothing has happened all this time. I'm excited about the trial. Thank you, Chris, for what you just said. But yeah, I know a lot of people in this community, in this, I call it a bubble because I feel like that's what it is. Everybody in this bubble cares about, but I'm saying outside of the bubble that you interact with on these issues, do your like normie friends care about any of that stuff? I would argue they don't. Zero Defects. Salty Cracker said years ago, stop wasting time on normies, focus on waking up sleeping lions. I like that. Ekim Navilis, you said it, John. People can still be distracted until something happens that makes every single one of us focus our attention on that event scenario. We cannot wake up the normies. Yep. And then Ekim Navilis again. I don't think the normie mandate was for Trump this election. It was a not Kamala mandate. It's the same reason I voted for the first time in my life for Trump in 2016, because I cannot be HRC. Yeah, definitely some of that going on. Babufio, just a hop online or shop online and watch that shopping appear in your media feed. Yep. There was this one time, this was like years ago, before I even started the Devolution stuff. This must have been 2019, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I was playing softball, and after softball, like, you go to the parking lot and like you drink beer, eat pizza, whatever, hang out with people. And one of my buddies was talking about this new golf course that he went to. I never heard of it before. It just opened. He's like talking about it nonstop and how awesome it was. And then that night on social media, ads for that exclusively started showing up on my phone. And this was 6 years ago. Like the phone was, I didn't Google it or anything.
Mhm.
The phone heard it
clearly
and started showing me ads for this golf course. It was nuts. Let's see. Jen Hud. Could Trump and military be going for the heads of the snakes, aka elite global families that control banks, wars, etc.? If we see zero big arrests in 4 years, then is Trump one of them, or did he get played? It's a good question. I don't think Trump is one of them. I don't believe that. If we get played, I don't think it's going to be because of him. It's going to be other people. But it's a good question. I think it should be something that's top of mind for everybody. And I think you should be operating in a way as if you can't trust any of these people.
Yeah.
Eleanor 2000, John and Chris, please be aware of a similar predicted bioweapon scenario for 7/4/2025. See page 3 from Biodefense Commission.
John, I'll just tell you, she corrects the link in a few Rumble rants later.
Okay.
So that link, the first link, does not work, but I can pull it up if you want.
I think I got it here. But yeah, if you want to pull that up, I'll keep going. If you want to get to the page 3 that she's talking about. G Fontes 119. Palantir's tech was used under Biden admin to find all those arrested or investigated for being in or thought to be involved with DC on January 6th, 2021.
That story package is a nice way to sell the idea that sort of tracking software should be used in the eyes of Democrats. You know, they're like, well, we need to get these insurrectionists. So if you got to use that, just fine. And then from our side, it would be the same thing, but for illegal aliens. You know, if we need to get rid of, if we need to track the illegal aliens who come across the border, know where they are in the country so that they can then be removed, well, we need this sort of technology. And, you know, whenever they're doing the border packages, when the Republican establishment is talking about doing things to solve the situation at the border, the things that they're talking about doing are escalating the technology at the border for exactly those sorts of purposes so that it can then be turned in to the rest of the country.
Yeah, you know what? I want to do one quick Rumble Studio ad. Show Rumble Studio a little love.
There you go.
I forgot earlier. And it's from 1775 Coffee. You still haven't tried 1775 Coffee? Now is your shot. The 1775 starter kit just dropped, and there's only 1,000 units. You're getting the bold dark roast that hits harder than a CNN fact check, the smooth medium roast, and the Vitality mushroom coffee for clean energy and laser focus with no crash. All single origin, small batch, toxin free, and mold free. Plus, you're also getting a gold spoon clip because freedom isn't scooped with plastic, a frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's political opinions, and a black 1775 tumbler that says, I don't take life advice or caffeine from a woke sea witch. $170 worth of coffee and gear, yours for $99. This is for the ones who've been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble, wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler alert, it is. Go to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something, just like Rumble does. Thank you to Rumble and 1775 Coffee for that. By the way, guys, don't forget to hit that thumbs up again. Also, we got another $20 over on YouTube. Thank you to Peter Friedrich for the thumbs up. Okay, I'm going to go back to this. Oh, did you find that page 3 thing, by the way?
Sure did.
What is
so I don't know what the content here is, but it sounds like one of those war game scenarios like they did with COVID.
Interesting. Okay.
Here it is. I mean, look at this. We are now hearing that the terrorists conducted smaller scale attacks in American cities and localities prior to the July 4th incidents to test our defenses and gauge our responses. These smaller scale attacks went largely unnoticed. So
it's a war game, though?
Yeah, about a bioweapon being released. The infectious agent they used killed at least 280,000 Americans, infected at least 400,000 throughout the country in a single day, in addition to the 200,000 dead and 800,000 sickened animals And of course, now we're probably going to have, these stupid animal flu outbreaks that we're hearing about.
Maybe the Glenn Greenwald thing was like disclosure for monkeypox or something.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I assume this is probably very interesting, but
yeah.
The most important thing when you hear any news about anything like that, the most important thing is to be like, I think there's at least a pretty good chance that that's bullshit.
Yeah, it should be with any news, period.
Yeah.
1027 JS says thanks. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you as always. Eleanor 2000, prior link dead. There's the link that you just pulled up. Belinda elections topic. Seth Keshel, the White House briefing this week. We will talk about that with him sometime soon. Maybe I'll have him on the Daily Herald this week, but also probably in the Power Hour next weekend. The Alpha Warrior Show says, my take fam, and then has a link. And then in the chat, I told him it's too long and I didn't read it. Because if I look at a post and it's this long, I'm not going to read it, especially not on air, Alpha. That's why I said TLDR. But I'm sure it's great, and I'll read it later. Keith O'Higgins, maybe Glenn Greenwald could interview Kanye's cousin now? I don't get it.
Oh. Well, remember what Kanye said about his cousin in the song a few weeks ago?
I know which song you're talking about, but I don't remember the lyric. I don't have the lyrics memorized yet.
Not that song. One of the songs before it, but it was about him doing something very naughty with his cousin.
Oh. Well, that's unfortunate.
Yes.
Rave Daddy 523, unpopular perspective. This is revelations because the Trump family are the seven trumpets. He is giving us the deal of truth while giving the leaders the deal of forgiveness. Retribution isn't coming now. I don't know. Key Fan Addict, we've already had a U.S. Senator executed for treason behind closed doors. Meghan McCain and John Kasich acknowledged it. Was one of the biggest Q proofs, stated 30 days before he died to the minute. I'm not sure which one. You're talking about John McCain? I mean, that's still a little speculation. I wouldn't say that's confirmation, but I guess I haven't read the Q stuff, so don't yell at me for that. I'll look into it. Rave Daddy 523, revelations, not revaluations. I think I like revaluations better.
Alpha, I just read Alpha's post. I think that his main point was that post in particular was put out to kind of make fun of people chasing after all of these ghosts. But
maybe we should read it then.
If you just read the end of it, you're probably going to get it.
Semper Fi, Alpha. I didn't get it. How about you read the relevant part when you get there?
Alrighty then.
Keith O'Higgins, Gabrielle had a fight with another woman at the Pentagon. She lost that battle of the new trench warfare. See what you did there. Opteasy, we all admit many are still normies, but normies are still waking up. I see it in my real life. My dad, who's a forever Republican, was mentioning 9/11 because of a Joe Rogan interview. Trump knows he's going on the media we hate, who are fake news. Thought you also discussed just takes that one moment for people to wake up. Many might have that moment when people they trusted now of Trump on the new truths to them are revealed. Great discussion tonight, gentlemen, as always. Thank you for the rants. I will say that the fact that Joe Rogan woke your dad up makes me wonder, why didn't Joe Rogan wake your dad up a long time ago? Because he had access to the same information the rest of us did. Then also, what happens when a new administration gets in and Joe Rogan is no longer being the truther that he is, and he goes back to regime narrative talking points?
He'll probably seem more like a truther than ever before because he will not have Trump there disrupting things. He would, in certain scenarios, have a totally normal, controlled political actor like a JD Vance, for instance, in that position. So if he just aligned himself completely with that, he would still be totally acceptable within the mainstream.
There you go. Rave Daddy 523, revelations, noun, a surprising and previously unknown fact, especially one that is made known in a dramatic way. Revelations about his personal life. Thank you. Patrick GBBP417, Gabrielle Substack article. I'll check that out. Q-Fan Addict, regarding those apathetic to current events, if all is exposed, they will then know without DJT winning 2016, many of them would have been killed or enslaved during 2017, 2024. The 16-year plan, are you aware? I've heard of this 16-year plan, but if that was a real legitimate plan, which I believe it was, I think they should disclose that and talk about that publicly at some point instead of playing the forever PSYOP game. Nevada Runner with a thumbs up. Thank you. John Drake, good to see you, man. I don't know why you didn't spend the whole show talking about Unapununa's fillerless lips. My girlfriend did send through a professional opinion that she's wearing softer makeup and the lips dissolved for sure, like the stuff. So that's why she looks like a completely different person. Maybe that's what Joe Biden's issue was too. It's just softer makeup on him and less filler. And that's why he looked like a clone sometimes. Builder Babe, July 4th, please look. I think we've got that one a few times. Meerkat, sorry, John, just a random idea. Maybe the Biden cancer is to kill off the actor so the actor can be paid and go back to his regular life. Okay, not an actor. Maybe.
Or maybe it's just that we have a state funeral set up for the big military parade. And in 50 or 100 years, people will believe that that massive parade was in Joe Biden's honor while he was lying in state.
Or maybe he just really has cancer.
Could be that.
Butthole cancer or prostate, whatever it is. Babbage 3, question from CG Riley on YouTube. Did y'all hear about North Carolina being sued by the DOJ having to do with the elections? Yeah, to clean up their voter rolls. I did see that. G Fontes 119. Palantir, also Rancor, have been selling almost annually updated predictive policing AI software to law enforcement all over the country. Pasco County, just north of me, was one. That's not concerning. The Meerkat, will horse paste cure the new horsey encephalitis coming soon to a city near you? Good question. The Meerkat again, can't wake someone who is only pretending to be asleep. That's true. Good, interesting point. Builder Babe, if you only respond to payers and to whom pays how much, does that make you feel like a whore? What are you talking about?
I think she means reading Rumble rants or something.
Oh, well, okay. Do you want us to go back through and read every comment that was left in the chat tonight?
Maybe it was because you read one of the rants while the show was running, but it wasn't hers.
Oh, well, she sent this like,
yeah, I don't know,
2 minutes ago.
Oh, well then, don't know what to tell you.
S Hole says, don't worry, be Cappy. Like that. Isn't that Isaac Cappy, I'm assuming? And then L Rosie, or one Rosie, can't tell if it's L or one. AZ News just reported on 5:30, Hickman Family Farms lost 95% of chickens due to the bird flu. Sounds like,
man, that's sad. I mean, Hickman, he just lost his whole chicken farm back in 2021, right before the board was voting on the Maricopa audit. Remember that?
Yeah, and now he lost him again. They must have another vote coming up or something.
Clint Hickman.
Yeah, it's interesting. All right, did you find a video by chance?
I have a suggestion for a video. I don't know if you are familiar with the television show, the HBO show Silicon Valley.
I've heard of it. Yes, I'm aware.
Oh, damn. It is hysterical. But there's a rich man who invests in the main character's company, and he is just the most hilarious version possible of a Silicon Valley billionaire. And
let's do it.
This is a highlight reel of his scenes. And I want people to pay special attention to the doors on the cars, because Elon just released a car this week that was kind of like that. Actually, John, before we do that, there's one other video I want to get your take on.
Okay.
I forgot about this, and I feel very bad about it because it's just so much fun. And it's also going to be the kind of thing that you are going to be like, oh man.
Is that a good oh man or a bad oh man, or like
it's going to be a bad oh man because you have to deal with some kind of more out there kind of stuff. But first off, this I put up yesterday, as potential for a meme. So this was Trump and Elon in the Oval Office. At some points, they were both looking up, staring up at the ceiling, which itself was funny. But then Scavino released a video, and they were like really staring up at the ceiling for some time. It was.
Was there a video on the ceiling or something? Like what was on the ceiling?
Here, look. It's like a minute into this video. So this is Scavino again.
That's been there a long time. That was plaster. Nobody ever really saw it. They didn't know the eagle was up there. And we highlighted. It's essentially it's a landmark, a great landmark. And
Pause it once.
24 karat gold, and everybody loved it. And
It's just that. Is there something? I wonder if there's something. You should send me this video.
I will. Okay.
I wonder if there's something weird about the eagle. Like, why are they pointing this out?
I wonder how many stars are around the outside.
It's not 17.
5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. It looks like about 50, I would guess.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so they're talking about the ceiling.
it's 24 karat gold, and everybody loved it. And now they all see it when they come in. So it's been good.
The Oval Office has, finally has the majesty that it deserves thanks to the president.
And so the idea was that none of the people had like seen that before because the gold wasn't painted in. So was it white before and just no one ever really noticed it because their eye wasn't being drawn there? Or were they just in a studio down the street in the replica White House?
Well, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
What's this?
Anyway.
Okay. Are you ready for the other video now?
Yeah. Did you also see, by the way, that Trump gave Elon Musk like a key to the White House yesterday?
Yeah.
Amazing. Just such an interesting display after taking the second most attention grabbing person in the world and bringing him back in for a TV show that went out live on all the networks. Trump's first thing that he did in it was have one of his assistants bring out a laptop and then showed them a clip of Rick Santelli on CNBC talking about how well the economy was doing. Hilarious.
That is funny. The whole Elon saga. I mean, we could have spent the entire episode just talking about that. He's like kind of, I don't know. Let's not go there. Let's not go there. We're just going to end with this. So thank you everybody for tuning in. This looks like 5 minutes and 30 seconds of the most memorable Russ Hanneman quotes from Silicon Valley. You guys have a great rest of your evening. Hit the thumbs up, and we'll catch you next time.
You like my ride? Yeah, they don't make it in this color. They did it just for me. Guys in this town don't have the balls to drive a car like this. They're billionaires, and they drive fucking Priuses. Why?
I think mainly just environmental concerns.
They're all lemmings, Richard. Everyone in this town is. Just look at them. Lemming. Lemming.
Okay.
You scratched my car. It's the rivet in my pants. These are cool pants, too. Fuck, that's a deep scratch. That will not buff out. Motherfucker! Fuck it. All of a sudden, I'm 22 years young, and I'm worth 1.2 B. Now, a couple decades later, I'm worth 1.4. You do the math.
Okay. Well, that's a gain of 200 million over 20 years. 16.66 repeating. That's less than 1% return. Inflation is like 1.7. I think CDs are 2%, so it's less than a CD.
Well, no one ever got laid putting money in the bank, am I right? Let's make you $1 billion. Let's make me $1 billion more. How's that sound?
You're not worried about the lawsuit?
Shit, no. I got 3 nannies suing me right now. One of them for no reason. So come on, let's do this. Let's kick Gavin Belson's teeth in at CES. And then when you're really worth something, I'm going to take you back to those same spineless VCs who said no. And I'm going to shove you right up their assholes.
I see a McLaren 650S with the extra trim package pull into the driveway. Or did I not?
Yep. So this is the team. Whoa. I was just gonna say it. This guy fucks. Am I right? Because I'm looking at the rest of you guys. And this is the guy in the house doing all the fucking. Am I right? You know I'm right. This guy fucks.
Thank you.
I like this painting.
Is it sperm? No, 3 commas. Know what has 3 commas in it, Richard?
A sentence with 2 appositive phrases in it?
No, $1 billion. Yeah, I'm in the 3 comma club. You know, you play your cards right, you could be in the 3 comma club too. But probably not. But you could be. But probably not.
Dad?
Oh, hey there, buddy.
Hello. Is this another board member? Aspen, it's time for bed. I don't want to go to bed.
I'm sorry, buddy. It's not up to me.
I need you to cooperate, Aspen. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Good boy, Aspen.
Company I'm funding, we call it the Lady. I press a button and the lady tells Aspen when it's time for bed, time to take a bath, when his fucking mother's here to pick him up. I get to be his friend and she's the bad guy. I've disrupted fatherhood.
It's visionary technology. I'm not a billionaire anymore, Richard. I'm a 986-ionaire, which isn't even a fucking thing. I'm out of the 3 comma club.
Functionally, I'm just like you. Jesus, fuck, that's depressing.
Right, but you're still basically a billionaire.
Not if you round down. If you round down, I have 0 billion. Forbes has taken me off their billionaires list. Instead, they'll probably put me on their close but no cigar list, which is ironic because I smoke a fuck ton of cigars. Why the fuck do I buy so many cigars?
Oh, we have a contract? We have a fucking contract, Richard? You want to know what I have? A fucking car whose doors open like this. Not like this. Not like this. These are not the doors of a billionaire, Richard. Fuck you! Fuck you in the ass.
A McLaren 650S Spider.
Yep. Just like the one I had to sell when I dropped below a B. Billion. What do you think, Richard? You like it?
Wow, I don't know what to say. You got this for me?
What? No, it's for me. I bought this for myself. To celebrate you guys helping me get back to $1 billion. That's why I came here, to show it to you. To say thank you. I'm not an asshole.
You drove here with a bow on it?
No, I put it on after I parked.
I don't know. I almost killed us. The company. That is just so selfish. I mean, if we have to get 1 million users, I need to get us funding right now.
How? We've already been turned down by every respectable VC in town.
Who said anything about respectable?
Oh, Richard, no.
Fuck yes, I want to talk business. What's the play? Let's fuck this thing right in the pussy. Thanks for meeting me here.